have no idea where this will lead us, but I have a definite feeling it will be a place both wonderful and strange.
Hello! And welcome to the wonderful and strange Twin Peaks Logcast. I'm Kalil, and with me today is the cream corn socket to my electrical vomit.
The most appealing of ideas. We hit the jackpot at first, and now you're putting that sort of filth in front of me, the Unplugged Professor.
Today we're talking about parts 3 and 4 of The Return. Part 3, also known as Call for Help, and part 4, also known as Brings Back Some Memories. And I will say this podcast is bringing back some memories to me because I believe we've done this before.
Hello! And then we keep repeating the podcast until
Yes.
eventually someone kicks us out and gives us a limousine, right?
That's how it works.
There we go. We're making our way.
I
We're
think
making a way.
Dougie shows us how to live our best life.
Dougie is such an inspiration.
The path of passive least resistance, you know? So we have recorded this before. This is our second time in attempting this podcast episode. And just for full disclosure, listener, I feel like the energy was off when we last tried it. And I'm being upfront because there's going to be a slight change in how at least I'm responding moving forward with this episode and possibly for the foreseeable future. I have found out that my mixed and kind of negative feelings on The Return are at points a little bit too much for me to try to maintain enthusiasm. In other words, I found out I like The Return less than I expected, and I don't want that to affect the quality of the podcast. I don't want that to affect the professor's first time viewing this series. So instead of me commenting directly on The Return itself, I'm going to instead focus more of my attention on poking, prodding, devil's advocating against the professor and his views, or for him. I'll play both sides.
I'm not going to come out the same at the other end of this, am I?
But that doesn't mean I'm gonna, you're saved from all of my viewpoints, Professor. I'm just thinking that maybe we'll end up talking about more of my opinions when everything's out on the table. When we know everything, we've seen all of The Return, and hey, I look at it this way. If we end up agreeing with each other, we can do like we did for Twin Peaks episode 16 and have a mutual hate. We could just go against it together. But if you choose wrongly and you end up loving The Return more than the original, and I end up hating The Return more than the original, we can have a nice showdown at the end. Right?
Right. A nice, peaceful showdown, and not something that's going to end up on a True Crimes podcast crossover, correct?
Correct. But listener, just heads up that you'll hear a little less of my opinions. It doesn't mean they don't exist. They're probably negative, to be honest. Just to keep it summarized, I find sometimes with The Return that a lot of the mysteries just don't mean much to me. And I find myself missing the characters and heart of the original show. And when we recorded this the first time, a lot of my critiques kept repeating those similar points. So when in doubt, assume that's what Kalil thinks as we move forward.
Very well. I will assume all your thoughts as I persuade you of the greatness that is Twin Peaks, as far as I know from the first 4 parts. That will continue
So parts
with
3
the momentum.
and 4, you enjoyed them?
I really enjoyed them, genuinely. Like the first 2 episodes, they sort of like proof of concept as well as like plays with the mysterious. This is where we go deeper into more so kind of Cooper, kind of Dougie Coop, kind of like a little dabbling of Mr. C, but it's a very Cooper-centric 2 parts to follow up with. This too is listed as something you play in parts together inside of the overall Blu-ray menu. So that is what we continued with in this case. So 2 episodes here, 2 episodes there. The next one's going to be 3 episodes on the disc, so I don't know how far we're going to go with the single, double, triple episode maybe content. So I suppose we'll find out when we get there.
Do you think that if these hadn't been listed together as like watch together as a feature on the disc, do you think you still would have wanted to combine these for the podcast? If they were on the same disc, but it didn't have an option for combining.
If it didn't have the option for combining, I can be a bit of a stubborn individual, so I wouldn't try to put them together. But in this retroactive sense, if I could talk to myself from the future and give myself a recommendation...
Is it future? Is it Professor?
The Professor would say, yes, combine these 2 together, because I do think that there is a substantial substantive amount of journey dealing with Dougie Coop between getting lost, if you will, amongst the casino to finally finding family that I think complements each other very well to view together. I think that this is another one in which it is better to watch together than separately.
Better together. How's that song go? Is that the Sweet Caroline?
Ba ba ba. No,
Wish Wyndham
no.
Earl hadn't killed you. Right?
No, I don't think that is the case overall. I think that for the most part, we just have, at this time, the least sweet of Carolines dealing with
Yeah. Where's this going?
Cooper just sort of like wandering. Dougie Coop. I keep mixing up because for the most part, forgive me,
No.
Kalil.
No forgiveness.
But having two Dougies sort of like
Yeah.
appear in the universe,
So we're gonna have
especially
to
so
try to
shortly
be-
after the previous Dougie.
We'll have to try to be consistent. So moving forward, I think what we'll try to do, Mr. C and Doppel Coop are the same character. If we refer to either one, they mean the same thing. I'll usually say Mr. C. When we say Dale Cooper, we're probably meaning the individual who was in like the Red Room or was talking to the giant ? 7 times. If we're talking about Dougie, we'll try to be specific that OG Dougie, original Dougie, is the guy we met for like 5 minutes before he got orbed. And then Dougie Coop is probably what we're going to call the person who came out of that socket and just repeats people's phrases, who's living the life of Dougie, but also may in fact be Dale Cooper to some degree.
Unless there's some secret history that's going to bubble over into the content of the return, or if for some reason the Milfords come into the overall scope, we'll try to make it clear then. But from
Dougie
this point
Milford,
on,
yeah.
Dougie, did we get a Jim? Dougie Jim?
No,
Dougie...
there's Sonny Jim.
I know there's Sonny Jim. Is that first last name, or is that just the first name, middle name?
Presumably, if we're going off of the credits.
Is there a space in between?
Sonny Jim has a space, but it is one name, Sonny space Jim, Jim. And then the wife is Janie E with a hyphen. Janie hyphen capital E. Janie E. Jones.
So Dougie E in this
No,
case.
he's just Dougie.
Just Dougie.
Just Dougie. Yeah.
Great!
Yeah. So overall, what did you find that really worked for you in these parts 3 and 4? What would you overall say your takeaway is?
For the most part, I would say it's Kyle MacLachlan's performance. I do genuinely feel between the sort of like 3 different performances that we're dealing with, one of the overall like unstoppable force that still gets somewhat stopped in this case.
That means the original
Mr.
Dougie,
C.
the unstoppable force. You have to get the Red Room involved to orb him because he's so powerful.
He's too powerful, but not yet to him. Mr. C, who does get a small little bit to shine through here.
So I miss him. I miss Mr. C. I won't say more. I just miss him. I like
miss
him
him.
so much.
You got a little snack. I'm sure we'll
Little
get more of it.
snack-a-see.
I'm sure we'll get a meal later. But in the meantime, we do have Dougie Coop, in which we get a little bit like a substantive amount of content with him.
Yes.
Followed by a little bit of Dougie here and a little bit of Coop there.
Yes.
Like there's like a high variety of someone trying to play off multiple styles, multiple characters, and multiple mindsets.
And
That
Kyle
is-
MacLachlan is doing a great job differentiating.
Absolutely.
I will say that. Yeah.
I will say that thoroughly. It is something that carries because there could be any point here where like things blur a little bit too much between characters that could create a lull. But genuinely, it kept my interest throughout with how he was treating his overall characters, if you will. So kudos to Kyle MacLachlan in that case. And I will do my best to keep that name in my head.
Okay.
Beyond that, the curiosity of the overall general mysteries coming up, as well as some pieces, my resentment for Gordon Cole, that also kept my interest for this. Absolutely still not liking Gordon Cole and having that pit continually dug deeper.
I
as we
can't remember
continue.
if we mentioned Gordon Cole in the last podcast episode. But for listeners just jumping in for the return, Professor has had a very wary feeling about Gordon Cole since season 2, I think.
Yeah.
And even around the time of like the Shelley Johnson stuff at the diner, he was already kind of suspicious of Gordon Cole. So this has been an ongoing thing that he's not really sure he can trust Gordon Cole as far as he can throw him in his hearing devices.
I can't throw him that far.
Do you think you could pick him up?
No! I haven't picked up anything in ages. I got flabs in my arms.
Okay, do you think you could pick up and
It's
throw... Which Twin Peaks characters could you pick up and throw the best, do you think?
The only ones I can think of would be the
Little
worst
Nicky.
options.
You could probably launch Little Nicky and
I
Sonny
probably
Jim.
launch Little Nicky and Sonny Jim, but let's not launch the children, okay? Let's not launch the children.
Well, what about teenagers? Could you launch any teenagers?
No! They could launch me!
You could probably pick up Donna and throw her out of
Donna could throw me!
I don't know. Like, if you think about the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, whenever they throw out DJ Jazzy Jeff.
I'm DJ Jazzy Jeff!
No,
I
I
enter
think
into
Donna-
the Twin Peaks household, and I get shunted out every episode.
Donna's the one who enters and everyone applauds and then gets thrown out by Uncle Phil. You're Uncle Phil.
I don't want to be Uncle Phil.
Just as Uncle Phil is a figure of mystery and importance in the lives of the family of Bel-Air, the Bel-Airians, we too are encountering an area of mystery and power in what I'm going to call the Mauve Zone.
Yes.
Now, one of the things that I'm trying to balance without giving any spoilers to the professor is what information to say and what information not to say. And I did end up calling this place the Mauve Zone to him off pod. That is not a name that's stated in the episode anywhere. I have, out of respect for the professor's wishes, not elaborated why I'm calling it the Mauve Zone. I will get to that later on at some point. But that's the term I'm going to use for this purple sea area and the environments within that complex that are there.
Yeah, it's something that's like a lower saturation of mauve, if you will, which is like a pale, like purplish color, if you will.
Yeah.
That I think that genuinely the filter does fit. It's just that the naming conventions of color followed by something else has been significant up to this
With
point
the
inside
red
Twin Peaks.
room, the
Red
black lodge, the white lodge, the pink flamingos, etc.
etc., etc. But still, it does absolutely create a nice overall atmosphere as just opening up. We literally have Cooper, when we have a chance to see Cooper again, falling through what seems to be almost cosmos, like everything's shaking about. This weird, like, strange cloud of a similar color begins bursting through the air, and what seems to be communicated through the overall filming is that he is met with this overall passing cloud to the point that he lands into a zone filled with
Silent
that color.
Hill.
Entering Silent Hill. It might as well be Silent Hill in many respects. This mauve filter over the head of a balcony beyond a window set. I don't even think it's like a door. I think it's like a full-on window peeking out to this balcony, just because there's no indicators for like stepping or anything like that. Beyond is an overall empty sea. I even think that the overall waves themselves are a little bit slowed down as well, because upon watching it a third time for the sake of the podcast, I ended up speeding through some overall moments with 1.5 speed, and it looked like normal waves at 1.5 speed. Like, as someone who's seen the ocean, it looked normal when you sped it up a little bit.
The tide is calm.
The tide is especially calm. That's defying any realms of time.
because it's in the presence of the Moonchild, Dale Cooper, obviously, right?
Fun speculation aside, the darkness of this is very unsettling, as Cooper ends up looking out before being distracted inwards and proceeds into the overall space. And already, like, this place is giving off several unique flares. For one thing, like, time is... If it was already jumbled inside of the red room, this is where you tear it up and then sort of like bunch the pieces together and put a bit of scotch tape over it, because there's a constant jittering inside of several motion in which there's also like a somewhat clearish film that's set over it, in which like whenever it comes from a point that you are in a present moment as versus with a corrupted moment, if you will, there's this severe jitter with that overall lens.
It's almost like a bit of bloom happening too with some of the lighting. It feels like there's a vibrancy to some of the things.
Absolutely. And this space is just like this lone chair, a woman in a red dress whose eyes are concealed by stitching and flesh.
Yeah, it doesn't look like she lost her eyes. It looks like skin got added on and got stitched over them.
Yep. And looks very familiar to an entity that was once nude inside of a glass box scene that we saw from the last episode, where someone's eyes felt like it was covered by lumps of flesh, feminine form, without a red dress, and that was attacking, if you will, these overall poor souls. As like this overall entity right here, at first being very calm, but in a scene that follows as Cooper becomes curious, is where like motions match up, lashing about and slashing comes through.
You give me a lot of stuff here to work with. I got a few questions.
Very well.
So first off, we land in this balcony space overlooking the sea. Would you call that a veranda? Do you know what I'm implying?
Yeah, I know what you're implying as far as Paper Mario is concerned, which a veranda is something that you just step outside before it ends up breaking out. But for the most part, it's stepping outside from an opening inside of your overall home. It's just that the window door aspect leading to the veranda is suspicious. As someone who I believe that comes with most verandas, usually it's a door that leads to it. I can't tell in this case.
I'm just wondering, because we've gotten a reference to veranda through the vision of Major Briggs, who does make a little cameo appearance through the appearance of that floating semi-transparent head. So I'm just wondering, do you make any connections personally between this balcony and the veranda that Major Briggs described to Bobby, or do you think that there's enough differences where you're inclined not to agree?
I would have to look back onto the text of Major Briggs in order to suss out more of those details. I do recall a veranda, but I could have sworn there was a potentially more light involved, if you will. I might be incorrect in what I'm remembering.
So I pulled up the quote from Major Briggs. I'm just going to read this whole dang thing because even if it isn't purposeful, maybe it'll make connections flare up in your mind. So if you do indeed agree with this.
Thank you.
So from Major Briggs to his son Bobby, this is in season 2, a vision I had in my sleep last night, as distinguished from a dream, which is mere sorting and cataloging of the day's events by the subconscious. This was a vision, fresh and clear as a mountain stream, the mind revealing itself to itself. In my vision, I was on the veranda of a vast estate, a palazzo of some fantastic proportion. There seemed to emanate from it a light within, this gleaming, radiant marble. I had known this place. I had in fact been born and raised there. This was my first return, a reunion with the deepest wellsprings of my being. Wandering about, I was happy that the house had been immaculately maintained. There had been added a number of additional rooms, but in a way it blended so seamlessly with the original construction, one would never detect any difference. Returning to the house's grand foyer, there came a knock at the door. My son was standing there. He was happy and carefree, clearly living a life of deep harmony and joy. We embraced, a warm and loving embrace, nothing withheld. We were in this moment one. My vision ended.
If it is something that's connected to that, for one, we don't see any spaces beyond what is inside of this overall hallway. We see a singular stairway that leads upwards, and I don't recall any doors on the side. Potentially there could have been. I only remember one door because there was a da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
That's the thing, it's not Bobby behind that door unless you think he's very aggressively knocking.
Bobby just really wants to make his presence known. But no, I think that if it is something that is correlating to that, I think that this is a sign that there may be a potential corruption inside of it. The corruption of the ideal, the corruption of the dream, of the reality that is correlating with Major Briggs's overall dream state.
So are you imagining this place, is it closer to the White Lodge or the Black Lodge, or is it not on that spectrum?
It's closer to the Red Room. Like, genuinely.
Which at this point, would you say is closer to white or black?
I'd say it's a waiting room, because the only thing that becomes close to the Black Lodge is when we move past it. And I think that I've at least acknowledged it, but I can't remember if you've acknowledged the vast difference in sort of the atmosphere and feel when we move past the curtain straight to these doppelgangers. It feels like a whole different space. It may itself be inside of that overall passing doorway. It might somewhat be similar. As far as my context goes for it, the Red Room is where they're still down, sitting, and mild conversation can go, and maybe something mysterious can spark its way through, but not with like this degree of threat or ambivalence or something to go against them. In this case, this is also where Cooper is. There are threats in the distance, but that's beyond the door, like beyond the curtain from the Red Room to the Black Lodge. In this case, whatever is beyond the door of the Mauve Room or the Mauve Zone is something new, I believe.
So if the Red Room is a waiting room, it is a neutral place, almost purgatorial maybe in nature. Would you say purgatorial?
Purgatorial,
Okay.
yes.
So if it's kind of like that, do you think the Mauve Zone is also a waiting room purgatorial space, or is it a different kind of neutrality?
It's kind of, I think it might be a little bit point A, point B. For the most part, I'm thinking to myself, well, it's a waiting room, but in the respect of returning someplace. It's almost in that respect.
It's a bus stop.
It's a bus stop. It's an airport. It's a place to transition to an intended goal, as opposed towards a waiting room in which you are here for specifically that reason.
Okay. So, that makes more sense. You have a little bit more agency in where you're going potentially here than you do in the Red Room.
Mm-hmm. You have an intention on where you're going. And I do believe that Cooper, who is looking around, looking from all these overall places, is trying to find a way out.
And by places, you mean outlets.
Outlets,
just
yes.
to clarify. So, broader question, and again, a little bit of recap here. Previously on Twin Peaks, the doppelganger evolution of the arm had shouted, non-existent, and the floor opened up in the Red Room. And that's when Cooper fell through, entered a bit of a sort of space area like we saw in this episode, but then plopped down onto that glass box in New York. Got sucked into the box, then got whooped out of the box.
Sucked into the box. As far as I can tell, the box shuddered back and forth.
Well, that was before. I'm saying he kind of got sucked into the box, floated there planking, and then got retracted back into the darkness of the box.
I think it's very notable that it also goes outwards, too.
Yes.
Like, it's like pulled back, but there's some resistance.
Potential tug of battle, whatever you want to say. Tug of war? Tug of war. It's not a battle, it's a war.
Yeah, it's less of a slip and slide tube to another reality. It's more of like shaking a can.
And then again, Cooper goes through that black and white starry space, plops into the Mauve Zone. My question then follows, who, if anyone, do you think sent Cooper to the Mauve Zone? So was this A, all along the plan of the regular arm, and I've been saying Mike, but apparently credits say Philip Jeffries, by the way. Philip Jeffries, which I think makes it really confusing. But anyway, so is it the plan of Philip Jeffries and the arm?
I'm just making sure to clarify. You're saying Philip Jeffries, not Philip Gerard.
Oh, I meant Philip Gerard.
There
My
we go.
bad.
I just want to make clear.
My bad.
Thank you.
Okay, that's where... Okay, the Philip Jeffries thing gets confusing, one, because it's like Philip Gerard, but then two, when you call him Philip Gerard and not Mike, Philip Gerard was always the human, so I'm kind of confused. What happened to Mike? I don't know. Anyway.
He had us all fooled. That's a magician. Now you see him. Now he's Philip Gerard.
Okay, so going back, correcting myself here. Is it A, that the regular arm and Philip Gerard wanted Cooper to go to the Mauve Zone to get to his destination? He just got detoured into the box momentarily, and then they corrected course? Is it B, that the arm and Philip Gerard never wanted him to go to the Mauve Zone directly? He was supposed to go somewhere else, and this is all the doing of the evolution of the arm and maybe even Mr. C redirecting Cooper to the wrong spot? Or is it C, somewhere in between, where it was never either party's intention, he just kind of got lost somewhere in between?
It's leaning to B and C. The reason why I'm going to dispute A is because all the language currently inside of the film shows there's contradicting information for the Red Room. In the respects that there's like Philip Jeffries or Phil Gerard saying that there's something wrong, if you will, and there's like this overall concern, it seems, from the evolution of the arm before the doppelganger of the evolution of the arm, it would seem, ends up lashing out against Cooper. Like there's like something of a force going on here whilst the Red Room is panicking. Which, if the Red Room, the mystical place in which it seems that they had all the cards in their hand, is panicking, then what's exactly going on?
Philip Gerard shows distress. And after the fact, when we get to Dougie Coop, he does say that Cooper's been tricked, that this is a bad thing.
He's been tricked. This is a bad thing when he's looking straight at him. Also, at a point where when Dougie ends up appearing into the Red Room, and there's a little bit of panic going on, he says, "You have been manufactured." It's not made clear that's from him, but from the way that the dialogue is given, it doesn't sound like it's from him. It's something where it's like, you've been manufactured, you're not supposed to be, and then fix that. By the correlation of events, it seems for the most part, Cooper should not be in this situation. What should have happened, by what the terms of the lodge were, is that the other has to return. They have to be here first before you can go out. You can't make any sort of like doppelgangers, you can't go through this. And if you do this, well, now one of you has to die. That is literally the dialogue Philip Gerard ends up giving forward. So with that conflict in mind, yeah, I think the Red Room currently has so little of a grasp going on with what's happening and is trying to correct course at this time. Which leads then to B or C from the regards of like, A, is it B, C, A? Is it something where Mr. C, the Mauve Zone, the doppelgangers, are they trying to like drag Coop into this, if you will, to either be kind and give him a fighting chance? Or is this something that is trying to benefit the Mr. C and or Bob. There's even confusion for me there on Mr. C's end.
Right.
I'll get deeper into that soon enough. There's no clue at the moment on if the zone itself is malevolent or not. The only thing that I can give you at this time are the attendants. If they are telling the truth, if they are being factual with their overall movements, it seems for the most part, the women in the red dresses, whether they are separate or the same, they are played by different actors. If they are just standing there, they are for the most part stopping Cooper from certain actions, and it looks like there's concern. There's like careful touches. Like it doesn't seem like there's like any sort of angry lashing outs that's going to cause any harm to him. And also fair warnings that that's an entity you don't want to mess with. My mom's here.
Yeah.
Like there's multiple things showing that at the very least this independent entity is trying to help Cooper or keep him out of a situation that would be bad for him, or if it's some sort of like 3D chess thing, getting Coop out of the way before they get problems from mom.
I think it's good that we're spending a lot of time at this section, because even though it's not like a ton of the runtime of parts 3 and 4, this MOV zone is dense. There's a lot of new material that we don't have quite before, because would you agree and say that, and I think you've already kind of implied it, but just to state it directly,
yes,
that the MOV zone has a very different feeling than the Red Room. This is kind of something new we haven't had in Twin Peaks.
This is very much new. I think, for one, it's matching with the current tone of what we have from The Return. I don't think it feels out of place at any point, but also it's something exciting, curious, and new that it feels like a larger portion, like a larger knob on this puzzle box in order to toy with, dial with. One of the big parts that I would have to say that I love is when dealing with future and past, whether I'm correct or incorrect about this, it's still something that is playing with my curiosity. There is a wall outlet, if you will. Right. It has the number 15 when we enter, when we have this overall strange filter on it. But after a few events that occur, and then we return to this room after something big and drastic happens, the number turns to 3, almost indicating, if I had to guess, using Cooper's key from his overall hotel room.
For room 315.
From 315, if you use that coding and use that with correlation of numbers, that may indicate that that is the past we're heading to, and the number 15, what we first experienced, was the future. So this is
which is concerning, because the future seems to be correlated with misery, to put it lightly, because that was when that individual with the stitched up eyes was making these slashing references. So going to the slashing references then, do you read that as a warning that if you go through this door number 15, this outlet number 15, you're going to get slash-a-doodled? Or do you read it as something else where the person with the stitched up eyes, you brought up a comparison point that the experiment in the glass box also did not have visible eyes. Do you think that they are one and the same, and that this is more of a threat than a warning?
By introducing Dougie in general, it adds an extra flavor that makes me very curious. If we are to believe that there is a Cooper, there is a Doppel Cooper, and there is a Dougie Cooper, there's 3 versions. Who's to say that there aren't multiple versions, like inside of that 2 to 3 range, for someone such as this? Because they were more so of a yellowed and grotesque, very similar to the interior of the bubble wrap in the evolution of the arm, to indicate that
the doppelganger of the evolution of the arm.
The doppelganger of the evolution of the arm. That may indicate that that was her doppelganger.
Okay, so you're speculating that this figure with the eye stitched up, that her doppelganger may in fact be the individual that killed Sam and Tracy, known as the Experiment.
Correct. I believe that
it's a working hypothesis.
It's a working hypothesis using the overall comparison of color, as well as using reflection of actions, using the base form and the doppelganger. It's something compelling enough to draw some overall connections, but at the same time, it doesn't answer enough questions as the mystery still lingers on what does that mean, because MOV Zone is still in that mystery end. Mixed in with, if we are to assume, though she is wearing a different red dress, but still wearing red dresses and being in the same overall sitting spot, different actresses. If we are to assume this is another person or the same person, like, what do we say that if that is a potential third form? Like how there is a potential third form for Coop. Are they playing with something in which, like, present, past, and doppel are like the 3 variations we gotta work with? There's a lot of Play-Doh on the table.
I mean, the experiment looked like it could have been made out of Play-Doh.
Oh
In the
yeah,
head department.
especially the overall eyes, which
Sure,
is
sure.
hence why we make the comparison, especially with the overall sounds and
Sure.
actions.
So the individual who is first there on the couch, who does not appear to be able to speak in a way that Dale Cooper can understand, who imitates the slashing, touching the face, seems to be warning, that individual, according to the credits, is called Nido. So Naido. And we also get cuts. You mentioned the red dress. We also get cuts to a fireplace that is featured prominently in front of her on the couch. Do you have any speculations, observations, or ideas on either the name Nido, the use of the red dress, or the fireplace? Given that we don't have much about this individual, do you think any of those things are important?
As of right now, other than comparing to other red dresses, other than comparing the physicality to something such as the other double, I think I've laid all on the table on where we can start putting some of those pieces together. Is there anything we can push further? I'm not sure. Like, as far as like the name Nido goes, what sort of origin does the name Nido have?
Do you want me to look into that?
Yes, please.
So when I search on Bing, the premier search engine, not sponsored, the first result for Nido is Nido on the Twin Peaks wiki. The second result is Nido wedding destination and wedding and honeymoon in Greece. So it clearly has its origin in Greek weddings, either of the regular or the big fat variety. Now, that being said, the Twin Peaks wiki does have a section on etymology for the name Nido.
Okay.
However, it involves heavy spoilers. So what I would suggest is that if you are familiar with the show and are also wondering about the name Nido, you can look at the Twin Peaks wiki. You'll understand quickly why I can't really, mentioning this.
Very well.
I also will say that there is a parallel I wasn't aware of prior, that Nido is portrayed by the actor Nai Yuki, who previously had appeared in Inland Empire, the one who had been delivering the surreal monologue, it says. So I'm going to assume, and again, I haven't done all the digging, that that's probably the person who was talking about her friend who was beautiful with the blonde wig and had the monkey. I'm going to guess that's who we're talking about here.
Okay.
Because surreal monologue in Inland Empire could be a few individuals, but not a lot of Asian characters in that movie, so I'm narrowing it down here.
Fair.
Also, there is something here that in Japanese Buddhism, the term Nido literally translates to inner path or inner teachings. And it also can have links to Taoism or Shintoism as well as Buddhism. And there's also some stuff over here that in the now extinct Tambora language, Nido is the word for black. And this was the language spoken by the Tambora, who were culturally native to the Sumbawa Island in Indonesia. And in Spanish, Nido is Odian, which means they hate in reverse. So you have three working theories that don't involve spoilers, and then
Yes.
some that do involve spoilers.
Yes.
So you get term for inner path or inner enlightenment teachings in Buddhism, Taoism, Shintoism. You've got it meaning black in this language that is now extinct, and you've got it reversed from Spanish meaning they hate. What do you make of those? Do you believe any of those matter?
As far as those go, like, I think you can draw a lot of them. I think you could even put them all into a
I
blender.
mean, contradictory things, maybe, possibly.
I don't think as far as they go, as far as like a contradiction in the respects of like, what is this space to Cooper? We did enough speculation inside the past of what is the Red Room to other individuals? What do they actively see? How is that actively incorporated? To say that Cooper falls into this overall zone on his own personal journey and comes across someone that is noted as potentially a name that is spiritual, something that amongst the overall rage that's happening inside the background, that there's a note that goes into the means of hatred inside the area. And then, of course, black being the overall usage of black in terminology when it comes to something such as the Black Lodge.
Now, what I would need to nuance then is that in that language that is now extinct, right?
Yes.
Does black have negative connotations, or is it just a color? Because that doesn't necessarily mean that it even means evil the way that the Black Lodge of like the English language, we oftentimes associate darkness with mystery or malevolence. I don't know if there is that kind of baggage in the language for Tambora.
Maybe not, but on the same token as you were just mentioning, like the usage of the unknown does have negative connotation, mostly because I think that there's a lot that you can't really face the
What
unknown
goes bump
with.
in the night, you don't know.
Exactly.
It's a very basic instinctual fear of the night, yeah. You never know if Sully and Mike Wazowski are going to be under your bed. Ooga booga booga. Speaking of Ooga Booga Booga, do you find Nido to be a scary entity?
In a smaller sense, no. In a larger sense, yes.
Okay.
Smaller in the respects of the instances that we see her. It seems to be more so protective. It seems to be more focused. It seems to be something personal, if you will, with her. Like, it seems that she's shaking when she was, like, touching the overall face of Cooper. But in the larger sense, like, we've literally got an entity extremely suspicious with strange sounds around her and potential correlations to murder. Very grotesque, very bloody, very hollow murder.
So are you more afraid then of Nido or the person, entity, whatever that's knocking on what could be a door?
Nido.
Okay.
Because Nido has enough information with the unknown, as opposed to its complete absence of unknown. I am believing that it's either A, something to truly find as a threat, or B, the thing behind the door isn't as threatening or will not be as threatening by the end.
Do you have any suspicions of what or who is behind that door?
Mother is evoked as an overall name, that Mother is coming, and it is something which either A, is an entity that could be recognized as Mother, an older entity with this overall realm, or it could be something along the lines of a idea, if you will.
It is really at this point ambiguous. We don't even know for sure if the banging is from Mother.
Mother as an entity and Mother as an idea being at the door and coming forward. I think the choice of Mother comes up into question if we are to grab from other source material from Twin Peaks.
Sure.
If we are to take, say, for example, from the Dale Cooper book, which Scott Frost wrote, and the absence of a mother there, whether or not that creates more so of an unknown context for Cooper.
Well, and then in the scope of Twin Peaks, what's the portrayal of mothers in Twin Peaks? You've got at least two of them for Dale Cooper and Laura Palmer who have like visions and supernatural leanings, but haven't themselves been malevolent presences up to this point. Yeah,
mothers have not been malevolent. If anything, they have been probably succumbed to probably the worst brunt of forces.
They're usually victims.
The most threatening of women inside Twin Peaks, I believe, are for the most part without children themselves.
Maybe Laura, when she's under Bob's influence with Harold, is a threatening form, but again, that is not a mother figure.
Nope.
That does raise some questions. And again, this is even speculating if Mother is correlated to the one knocking. And the line you're referring to from the character in the red dress after Nido, and in the credits, that character is called American Girl. The American Girl, or a American Girl, says, "You better hurry, my mother's coming." And when I heard that, one of the things that came to my mind that I kind of want to run by you then, is when I think of like, you better hurry, my mother's coming, I think of like a teenager who like smuggled their boyfriend into their bedroom, and it's like, you need to leave out the window right now because my mother's coming, she's going to find out about us. What connotation do you get out of my mother's coming? Do you draw any connections like that, or do you think it's like totally different thing?
The idea does come into the mind, especially when it comes to a threat that is much more apparent to her personally than externally, because, again, the threat and the power of Mother is not being seen yet.
Stereotypically, in a lot of television and film, the father is the one who's dangerous because he's the more likely one to pull out a shotgun and attack the boyfriend.
Yes.
The mother is more likely to kick the boyfriend out and then really get down on the daughter and yell at her.
Yep, if the overall TV stereotypes continue inside of this. But with this...
mothers can have shotguns too. Say it with me.
No!
Shotguns for everyone. This is America. Except it's not. It's an interdimensional purple zone.
And in this interdimensional purple zone, I do think that A, a lot of A's and B's here.
Yeah.
A, you could be that this is just an apparent threat that is intense by the only standards that this zone knows. Or B, it could be something in which, correlating to Cooper, could he have had one of these overall relationships? He seemed to be involved with a lot of ladies, if you will, inside the past to potentially run into one of these situations of, you've got to get out before my mother arrives. In fact, there was even one complication with a mother inside the books itself.
And that's the question. David Lynch has said he never read The Secret History of Twin Peaks. Do you think he read Mark Frost's brother's book? Do you think he read My Life, My Tapes?
I think that since Mark Frost has a billing inside this, and Mark Frost has a chance to overall read Scott Frost's book, which I do believe that was his brother.
Yeah, I would assume Mark Frost read his brother's book.
Yeah. It's a large assumption. I don't have anything to back it up, but I have at least a decent assumption that your brother writing a book for the series that you're passionate about, likely.
Well, because we know David Lynch at least read The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, which his daughter wrote.
Yes.
So, I don't know. I'm just going on a limb here. Okay, so, again, there's 2 doors. There's door number 15, or I say door, I mean outlet, right?
Yeah.
Outlet number 15, and then later outlet number 3. Are you working under the assumption that if Dale Cooper would have gone into outlet number 15, he would have got sliced and diced? Naito was warning him. That's the situation.
Either sliced and diced, or it just wasn't a time for him to go out. It would have been a failure, because what I'm assuming, if we are to believe 3 is past, 15 is future, 15 was a point where Mr. C was around, if you will.
Okay.
And Mr. C was holding the breath and was holding on for dear life to make sure that everything is contained, and that would have been a potential losing battle for Cooper to exit out on. Like Mr. C.
So you think 15 would have went into the electrical socket of the car?
Yes.
Okay.
And Cooper's overall soul well-being, whatever he may be, would then be thrown out into the open air with no real place to replace. And who knows what will happen to a soul processed if it can't replace anything. So,
and then outlet number 3 later, right? Outlet number 3 later then is leading into the socket of the Dougie. Well, it's not Dougie's house. It's a house that's on a different street that was being used as a meetup location for Dougie and the sex worker Jade.
yes, I do think that that is the case. And I do have also other substantive information to deal with this. For one, there is one like large explosion, clang, bang that happens when it comes down to like Dougie sort of like disappearing. And for when the number 3 sort of like place appears, there's a light on the side that just goes off, and it's just like once, like a bing, and it stays on. It's resonant. It's going as operations go. The number 15 one, though, as Cooper is getting attention towards that overall outlet, the light is going wild. It's buzzing wildly. It's like zzz, 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 very similar to the sounds and buzzings and the violent movements of the car little outlet, the little smoke piece, whatever is that called, the car adapter section, is buzzing frantically as well. I think that that's an audio connection between both of those spaces on where, yeah, this is a no pass zone, everything's going a little bit wild here. It's very dangerous. Put up the red tape onto this, or the yellow tape, or whatever tape you need to make sure no one goes here, because right now the energies are frantic.
Okay, so returning to the Mauve Zone, we have this situation where Naito, after telling Cooper or suggesting Cooper don't go through 15, leads him up this ladder into an outside area, which suddenly the outside is like a void of space. It's not the sea anymore.
Yep.
And they're on this weird box-looking thing with like a bell-type object.
With 2 gauges on it, very similar to car gauges, I would say.
And Naito seems to know what she's doing, pulls this lever, holds on to things as she's electrocuted, and floats away.
And that's the thing. The electricity attacks Naito, which leads me to believe that potentially Naito, and by extension these red-dressed individuals, could be good forces. They could be, at the very least, this version of them, potential good forces, because if electricity is attacking them...
They're conductors.
For the most part, electricity has been associated with the overall movements of things such as the Red Rooms and any of the antics going on with that. If it's something like this is working in opposition of that, and Cooper is getting himself in, at the very least, maybe the Mauve Room or these individuals might see themselves as good and forces that are necessary to move in opposition of the Red Room.
Yeah,
I don't think that they're working together in
doesn't
that
everyone
respect.
see themselves as good?
Yeah.
Except for Wyndham Earl. I think he saw himself as evil and laughed about it.
I am the most pure of individuals. Pure evil!
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you then interpret that Naito pulling the lever, cause and effect, that is what switched the door from 15 to 3?
Yes, I do believe that by switching the overall lever, and since everything around the space reacted at the same time, that was the lever that pushed things into the past, if you will.
Then what about the Briggs?
The Briggs passing by?
Floating Briggs head. Was that cause and effect, or is that just like random coinky dink?
It's whether you believe that this is all sort of like Cooper's head interpreting things, or if it's just a way of symbology showing off Briggs's heads to communicate to Cooper, because it's in a sea of stars. So and remember, from the overall original series, Major Briggs was reading messages out of the stars, out of the cosmos. Right. So to have that sort of like visual overlapping with the stars, maybe the stars communicating through a familiar visage of Briggs to him.
That's always another layer when we're talking about especially these scenes that take place in the Red Room or the Mauve Zone or the black and white space.
Yes.
Is this feeling that we don't know what is quote-unquote real and what is a projection. For example, end of season 2, Cooper was facing off against different images of, like, Caroline or of Wyndham Earl, or different gray-eyed individuals. How many of them were, like, quote-unquote there physically, and how many of them are more reflections out of Cooper's mind? They're his own subconscious, his own fears and desires manifesting outwardly.
Yes.
It's anyone's ball game what is a corporeal entity with permanence and what is more of a Hall of Mirrors effect where whoever comes in, they're being refracted. So, on that note, was it really Major Briggs there? Like some semblance of soul or spirit? Like it's really Major Briggs? Was it a ghost of Major Briggs? Or was it only Major Briggs to Dale Cooper because of associations in his subconscious? It sounds like you're kind of entertaining all these possibilities.
I'm entertaining all the possibilities. The one that I lean to the most is the idea of D, in which the stars are actively communicating using this as a visage.
And the
that's
message
familiar.
is Blue Rose.
Yes, Blue
Which
Rose.
would have meaning to Dale Cooper. He does seem to know what a Blue Rose case is from Fire Walk with Me.
It seems for the most part, when one is told something of a blue rose, that's a clear point of communication that something is up or there is an intended outcome from what we saw with Chet Desmond in the past, and especially with Sam Stanley prying with that.
Do you think Dale Cooper already would have figured it's a Blue Rose situation, or do you think he needed to be told?
I think that for one, it could be telling for the audience. Number two, it's always good to remind people to make sure that they're on the same page and something is confirmed if there is somewhat of a belief in it. But overall, if it wasn't clear before, it is
I mean,
most
he's been
certainly
stuck in
now.
this place for like 25 years. So I say place singular, but, you know, places, how do you want to dice it? I'm just wondering, do you need to tell that guy, hey, by the way, you know, I'm just curious. And just to refresh the audience, what do you interpret a Blue Rose case to be? Digging way back to your memories of Fire Walk with Me and what you now know from things?
If I'm recalling correctly, when it comes to a blue rose case, it is something with the rose association with the overall sense of blue. I find blue to be more of a mournful color, more of reflection, and rose is to oftentimes be associated with giving in response to either want or loss. And in this case, I do think it's a mission in which it's going to have not the greatest outcome. It's not necessarily a suicidal mission, but it's something that will not work out well for the operative. Like, it's something of a finality, if you will. There's never been a point in which Blue Rose has been a casual note, if you will. It seems that for the most part, people take Blue Rose very seriously.
Okay. So going back to the idea of potential mental refractions and Hall of Mirrors effect, when Dale Cooper goes down the ladder, like I was saying, like we were saying before, it's not Nido anymore. It's this new character named American Girl. You wouldn't necessarily know this unless you happen to recognize the actor, the same actor who plays Ronette Pulaski in the original show, and that is Phoebe Augustine. So then there's the question, is American Girl the same person as Phoebe Augustine, because in some buried part of Cooper's subconscious, he is imagining the face of Ronette Pulaski, the other girl who was a victim in the case that happened but survived? Or is there some other real, quote-unquote, significance to why Phoebe Augustine is playing this character? Why bring the Ronette actor in to play American Girl?
Not enough information at this time. For the most part, you can see, like, My Mother Is Coming, if you will, and the dialogue there being something that could be re-uttered, if you will, by a character like this. She was a teenager, if you will. She probably had certain desires, and we've seen her dabble into the darker nature of things because she was on the overall side of Laura, if you will. A lot of her story is untold, though. Circle back, though, where she says something along lines of, when you arrive, you will already be there, or something along those lines.
Right.
Not usually something I would hear from a teenager, if you will. So I'm already dabbling in multiple pies.
He doesn't see the teenage version of Ronette. He does see an older woman.
Yes, but she also later on sees the older version of Laura Palmer now, for, well, obvious reasons.
Right. So, again, I'm just wondering, how much do you read into the casting? Because anyone could have been cast as this new character, if it is a new character.
It's another piece to the puzzle
Okay.
at this time. It is something that I'm keeping in mind. It is something that's off to the side, but I need to see more of this individual in order to continue to make these links.
When you're thinking of all these puzzle pieces that you're being given, do you prioritize some as seeming like they're more important than others?
Yes.
What would you say are... How high does this mystery rank, this puzzle piece with Phoebe Augustine playing the American Girl? Is that in the higher, lower, or more middle?
It's a middle piece at this time. So here's how I'll explain it.
Sure.
It's a middle piece. It's somewhere in the middle of the puzzle, and it's time to work on there. For whenever I work on puzzles, I work on to the frame first, and then work
that's
inwards.
the only right way to do
That's the main way to do it. Sometimes I'm feeling a little chaotic and just go straight in between. But no.
Maybe I'm arrogant. I'll see a situation where I'm watching a show, and they have to complete like a perfully white puzzle, and they talk about how hard it is. I'm just like, go find the corner piece.
Exactly.
Go find the corner pieces in the
mauve
edge.
room, the mauve zone, the mauve whatever is a corner piece. That
Sure.
is like something heavily important I put down, and that's where I'm like branching other things out with.
Okay.
But this one that lurks inside the mauve zone, it's somewhere in the middle, somewhere close to that corner piece, just because somewhat of that picture's
Sure.
coming together. But still, it's not connected to any other pieces I'm setting things
Okay,
through.
what about like Jacoby with the shovels? Where does that fit? How big is that in the puzzle?
I see it on the box, and I'm looking across all the pieces. Like, I'm pretty sure this one's missing. I'm pretty sure
it's a missing piece.
This might be-
Gotcha.
That was, I gotta say, I do love that overall moment. And it takes its time, if you will,
Yeah.
for the Jacoby literally using a spray can on the overall shovels to make them bronze, gold, rose gold. I'm very bad with metallic
And I will
colors.
not obviously say my interpretation of things.
But it looks like he's making some very nice art pieces, if you will, for maybe Big Ed's backyard, so...
All I have to say about the shovel thing at this point, that can be said ahead of time, is that the credits do say Dr. Lawrence Jacoby.
Mm-hmm. And we did have someone say Doc in the
So Doc
last
isn't
series.
just a nickname, it is in the title of the credits. DR. So,
Dur.
which, I don't know.
Maybe that's just like the new name he adopted.
So now you have to assume either he renewed his medical license, or it's still a nickname even though the credits say doctor, or this is an alternate timeline where he didn't lose his medical license.
Or he lost his medical license but became a vet afterwards. I don't know if that's possible. Can you go from people, lose your medical license, and say, I can be trusted with animals, and go for that medical license? Is that allowed?
I'm sure they have to track you somehow. This is their 7th time being a doctor. We're not going to allow you to do any more doctoring. You know what kind of doctor Dale Cooper needs? A shoe doctor.
A lot of them.
A shoe doctor.
A shoe doctor.
Not a foot doctor. A shoe doctor.
A shoe
Because his
doctor.
shoes will not go into the socket when he goes through and meets up with the Dougie realm.
They don't go through the overall socket. And there's multiple things you can do for that, I think. For one thing, I like the idea of shoes being absent and left behind. The first thing I immediately think, forgive me, but Wizard of Oz. Like these shoes being left behind from an overall person, and then wearing those shoes on one's overall journey and or quest. Like,
Sure.
Forgive me if I'm incorrect on saying this, but I'm pretty sure that David Lynch looks fondly onto the Wizard of Oz.
I don't think you need me to answer that. You saw Wild at Heart. If you need me to answer it after you've seen Wild at Heart, I do not know what to tell you.
But no, the clothes go straight with him through the outlet. You could say something about like, oh yeah, the shoes keep you grounded, and in order to be an electrical flow, you must lose that grounding. You can smooth through. You can Wizard of Oz it up. In any case, he loses his shoes before he is shunted into this new reality.
One possibility I will bring up that I did say when we last recorded this episode, and I do think it's worth bringing up to your attention again, is the idea that when you're trying to conduct electricity, a lot of times shoes are a barrier to that. So I imagine like someone's trying to give someone a static shock, you know, like someone's rubbing their socks on the carpet and then they go and bzz, someone.
Yeah.
Usually you have to take your shoes off because they do block that. So I almost think of the idea of shoes are a blocking force of the conducting.
another idea, if you will, run with me on this. But we meant
Am I
before
running
that
with
this
or
is
without
like
shoes?
without shoes, because remember we were saying bus stop or airport.
Yes.
This is the part where you take off the shoes before you walk through the machine, if you will.
Oh, that could be. That could be. And going back to my idea of earlier, I called potentially Nido and American Girl conductors because of the way they conduct electricity. If this is a train stop, they could be a conductor in more than one way. Choo choo.
Choo choo, take off your shoes. Choo choo.
Take off your shoes. Shoo Shoo, by the way, great Twin Peaks cover album. Shoo Shoo plays the music of Twin Peaks. Not sponsored. Shouting it out there. Great time. If you like covers of music. It's very nice and dark.
Dark. No, check them out. From what I remember, overall, I really enjoyed it myself.
Haunting. So we are now done with the Mauve Zone. We could split a few directions. Mr. C doesn't have much on his own, so I'd rather just talk about Mr. C more when we get to stuff with the Gordon, Cole, Albert, and Tammy storyline.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, he's holding back the vomit. He's suppressing the vomit, and
Mr. C is suppressing
Mr. C is suppressing it, and it seems like we're kind of on the same page that he's holding it back, has some connection to the idea then that the original Dougie, who was in that room with Jade before she leaves, he then vomits something out. That's connected, right?
It's something in which, like, it's either a result of what happens, or it's something deeply connected to with the release of this will lead into something that deals with paranormal force. So there's a couple more examples I can give later on in this episode, but for now, by giving in and releasing and just like letting this go, that leads a direct entry, if you will, into the red room, into the red spot. It's definitely a new fun mechanic to be
I
shunted
don't know
in.
enough about electrical stuff to know the terminology for this, but it almost reminds me of like you're redirecting the current.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a term for that? Is that a transistor?
I'm not an electrician, so.
Okay, me neither. I don't know. You heard it first here, folks. We are not electricians.
Sorry to disappoint, folks.
I know you're supposed to tell people that on a first date. We've had 65 of them, I think, by this point. Sorry.
It's out now, though. Do you still love us? I don't see a lot of love coming into Dougie's life, though. It seems that there's a lot of complications coming through. I don't know the guy personally.
I do.
But him going into this zone from vomiting, just stepping back for a moment, Dougie is being chest rubbed and attended to by a woman.
So the woman is a sex worker named Jade. She's got 2 gold ring hoop earrings, and she's massaging Dougie's arm because his arm has gone numb and tingly, and it's the same arm that he is using to wear the jade ring.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
So my question, I guess, for you, do you do much with the idea that she is named Jade, he is wearing the jade earring, she has the gold earrings?
It's only like she's only wearing the earrings at this time, like, and maybe like there might be some sort of like points where you can point out here and there. I think that it is a direct parallel because there's a lot of naming parallels
It's weird
that happen in the scope to like say that this one couldn't be in the running would be.
But like, what does it
dishonest,
mean? Like, what does it mean that she's named Jade?
The red room is oftentimes associated, and wearing the ring, being told not to wear the ring, it's something in which it seems Dougie has gone full hog, if you will, into the overall red room style aesthetic, that he's leaning completely into his overall desires. There's no real discipline going in from what we can see at this moment. So him lying inside this bed and just sort of like letting everything sort of like fall over him while he wears this ring, the connections to the red room are like numerous already.
We don't know exactly what wearing the ring means. It does wed you in some way to a lodge spirit or the lodge in general, perhaps. But generally speaking, people who wear this ring, things don't happen to them in a good fashion.
No.
In the sense that you either die or you're impeached, like Richard Nixon, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's either real death or political death in some way seems to happen to you.
It seems that
in most cases.
Yeah, misfortune is something to follow. And by the gods, does it seem that Dougie is going through a lot of misfortune, if you will. So after like a moment goes by, Jade goes off to the side, locks herself inside the bathroom because she's going to clean herself after they have done the dirty deed. That is when
it's only dirty because he's having an affair on his wife and it's based on lies.
Yeah, no, if you want to have sexy time with some other person, by all means. It's just that he's kind of not so great.
He's doing it behind his wife's back.
Yeah.
What would Sonny Jim say?
He doesn't say anything, really, so
nothing.
nothing.
He doesn't speak, apparently. I also want to throw out the possibility, I don't know if you want to do anything with it, but I'll throw the weird-looking lure named Annie from the Access Guide into the sea of your consciousness. There was another Jade in Twin Peaks outside of the Jade Ring, and that's from the Jade and Emerald twins of the certain soap opera that used to air in season 1.
Things are most certainly greener on the other side, but as far as those items are concerned,
Do you think that Jade invited him to love?
I think that he invited himself into love. I think that he made these choices himself.
I don't know. Do you do anything with the idea that Jade was also the name of a character in Invitation to Love?
I think that there may have been like some ideas tossed around, and that was maybe sort of like playing with some ideas without pushing the envelope. Haha, pun, Invitation to Love. But I don't think that there's any substantive enough information to say it's a direct parallel, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the color green and the colors red and also blue, and the fact that green was used twice inside that, I do think that at the very least there were like some alpha testing ideas there.
There's also a potential parallel you could draw with Leland Palmer in the sense that he was also a father who would leave his home and drive elsewhere to a different location to sleep with a sex worker. And the ring was involved. Just the difference is that
The ring is on the other hand.
the ring is
now.
on the other hand. But do you do anything with the potential Leland parallels there? The Teresa Banks Jade parallel?
I suppose it might be a parallel you can put forward to someone who is in deep versus someone who is too far gone, perhaps, because that's the main identifier, I would say, that for the most part, when it came to the deaths of Laura Palmer to Teresa Banks to even Dougie, it's something that is saddening. It's something that overall ends up hitting them, and still you can see like the glimmer of like that overall person on the other side. But in the meantime, Leland was so far gone in the sense of like he was still loving, but his reflection was still that of murderous intent. This was the person who would do the actions. This was the person who would go as far as he needed to go. These other people were mostly hit up by the world because of how much they leaned into their desires. For better or for worse, I think that for the most part, Teresa Banks was someone who was more forced into their overall situation thanks to her overall lack of overall family connection, for her like lack of good living situation, and for what money that she may have needed. I think that that's one unfortunate stake. I think Laura Palmer's unfortunate stake. Maybe by extension, Dougie is an unfortunate stake as well.
Okay, I'm not 100% following. So do you think there is a purposeful connection with Leland here or not?
I think it's a good parallel to put,
Okay.
if you will. It's just the difference between victim and killer.
Okay.
Like they
So you
all
feel-
three ring users have still done bad things,
Yeah.
but they've never done something as bad as murder.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, no matter what you think of Watergate, I don't know if you'd condemn Richard Nixon to murder. I don't know. I'm not sure. Okay. And before we move on too far, I've also forgot something else with Mr. C that I need to make sure I mention, is that when he's suppressing that puke and he's on the road, he is wearing a shirt underneath his leather jacket that's like a button-up shirt. And when I was pausing it was like asking the professor off pod, like, does that look like snakeskin to you? And we were kind of in agreement it does sort of look like snakeskin. Now, it's not a snakeskin jacket, but do you think that this represents Mr. C's belief in individual freedom and whatever Nicolas Cage said in Wild at Heart?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, there could be that sort of like coming up to the forefront. I think that more than trying to reference another material, I just think that David Lynch has a list of ideas of what these things mean.
He has an alphabet.
And he can reuse them in other scopes.
Maybe not an alphabet, more like a...
He's got like a nice little like library Dewey Decimal System that he can like pull out from.
Maybe. What do you call that? You're into like puzzles and stuff, right? What do you call it where you have like different symbols mean different things? Like, is that like
A cipher.
A cipher. It's a cipher. Could you say that?
Yes, I could say that.
Okay, so what is it a cipher for?
It's a cipher for
case of
individuality and
snakeskin.
personal freedoms.
So Mr. C is also a fan of individuality and personal freedom.
It could be. I think that maybe that's just like where
Mr.
the trail...
C is the libertarian.
It may have been the trail that was led, if you will, like the surface level of it could be individuality and surface freedoms.
I think, Dale Cooper is the Democrat, and I think that Dougie's the Republican, and obviously then Mr. C is the libertarian. I don't know who the Green Party candidate is. We'll have to see if there's any more Kyle MacLachlans. That's the end of my joke.
That's the end of your joke.
You can, if you read into that and you're offended by it, I leave that to you. I have not said any value judgments on any of those things. You can be as unoffended or offended as you want to be on that particularly confusing and unclear statement I just made.
Dougie's head pops.
Dougie's head pops. So Dougie is into the red room. That's the exact situation that happened.
Yep.
And he looks confused. He doesn't seem to recognize this place or feel aware of it. So if he has been here before, he doesn't seem to remember it, or he's never been here before. This is new to him. And I bring that up only because we're getting this indication that he was manufactured, and we're also knowing that he has the ring. It's not hard to believe he might have been to the Red Room before, but he acts like he hasn't been, for sure. And Philip Gerard is the one that is there. Again, not Mike, because the credits say Philip Gerard. And he's the one kind of giving this information to Dougie that he has been manufactured for a purpose, and now that purpose has been fulfilled. What do you then think was the purpose for Dougie, original Dougie?
I think that the purpose for the original Dougie was to have a vessel where two things can coexist at once. I do think that this is, again, if we do believe that this is bumping into the past, if you will, by whatever amount of years, time, what have you.
Oh, God, I just thought of a comparison. He's a battery. He holds the charge.
Wait, you'll have to run that through me a little bit.
I'll run the electricity through you, sir. Okay, well, if we think of Dougie as being a tool in some way, a machination, to make it so that both Mr. C and Dale Cooper can temporarily exist in the same time. I think we used this on the comparison last time, but if we didn't, I'll say it again now.
Very well.
There's the idea that Mr. C and Dale Cooper exist within the same soul, body, or you could possibly say frequency.
Okay.
And a certain electrical component, right? And if we think of Dougie then as a battery, he can temporarily store the charge that is Dale Cooper.
Forgive me, but this kind of just reminds me, if you will, like the difference between like the plug-in situation is versus with gaining those batteries for his overall first tape, if you will. The overall outings that would be able to keep that substantial charge, if you will, grounded as an overall body are no longer there because that cord has been yanked. So having something with this temporary charge, if you will, may be very important because there will be a time and place where if things are not done, that's going to be bad for everyone involved.
The battery won't last forever either. It might be an energizer, so maybe it'll be long lasting.
It's a C-type battery.
Oh, okay. Also, it means that Dougie is neither good nor bad because he got a plus on one side and a minus on the other. I don't know. I however seriously you want to take my comments, you could look at Dougie as a battery.
You could look at Dougie as a battery, but again, it's like for what ends, what charge, what means.
Yeah. What do you got to put that battery in?
We'll likely find out later on.
There'll be a giant mecha coop over Twin Peaks, and you have to insert Dougie into the back, and then it like lights up and starts charging and stomping all over the town.
I told you they had to kill the nostalgia. I didn't realize it was going to be in a straight up like Power Ranger
and
sequence.
And he's like an action figure, so he says like stock phrases like "damn good coffee" as he's like stomping on all the things.
Showtime
Smell
was really...
those Douglas firs, and then like shoots a laser beam out of his mouth.
Showtime was really trying to push the toy market with this one, and honestly, I can put a lot of respect with the
another
sweet
Dale Cooper. That's
toy.
the Green Party candidate, Mecha Coop.
What do you even say about that? Or is that
I
just
don't know. You decide.
You decide.
What's the messaging here, man?
And so the messaging that we have to be concerned about as we continue on this overall like line of questioning is that eventually, like Dougie begins sort of like noticing that his hand slowly like recedes.
The one that has the jade ring.
With the jade ring kind of like turns smaller, smaller, smaller before the ring falls off and goes, that's weird.
We all are with you, man.
And before his head pops like a balloon. I believe that this is a substantive through line that we have, as well as another scene in the future where this is showing that Sonny Jim was part balloon on his father's side.
Okay, so again, for listeners just joining us on The Return, way back when we did the short films of David Lynch, of course we had the ones that are very well known that are collected and sold as the short films of David Lynch, but then I also added some extra ones. And when I was looking for other David Lynch films to add for us to watch for the episode, I randomly stumbled upon one called Pierre and Sonny Jim. And I was like, what? Because I'd never seen it before. It's like a 3-minute thing. You can find it on YouTube. And I was just caught off guard because Pierre is the name of the Tremont Chalfant boy who's played by David Lynch's son in the show and is like a magical magician kid. And then the other one, Sonny Jim, I knew from The Return.
Yes.
Now, I will not spoil Sonny Jim's involvement in anything, but these two children figures that appear in Twin Peaks have their own special. Well, then you watch it, and it's two balloon-faced children people screaming in agony as one of them is dying, maybe?
Do we even, like, was there, like, name tags on one of them to know which one pops?
No, it's up to you. I like to believe Pierre's on the left, Sonny Jim's on the right, left to right logic. But we don't know. It's even more ambiguous than all of the returns. Pierre and Sonny Jim is the true puzzle.
And I'm just going to put that in the other middle piece right next to Ronette's.
But yeah, so for those listening, that's what if we refer to balloons with Sonny Jim and Pierre, especially Sonny Jim, that might be why.
Yeah. So his head literally pops, and there's a dark void that is present there instead. There's a point where this overall dark void begins to craft, if you will, a few...
The smoke monster from Lost appears in his shoulders.
It slowly merges into this strange overall potato shape, and before...
Well, first there's a gold orb.
There's a gold orb that does appear.
Yes.
And it also does, like, flash around. Eventually, the gold orb does sort of, like, plop down on.
Yeah.
But the potato is doing a lot of things.
Well, to me, it reminded me of a rock. And then also, as it became more fleshy and started birthing, it kind of reminded me of what the head looks like on the evolution of the arm.
Exactly. That's what I was going to get at myself. It's something that is shaped very similar. The place where the mouth birth is happening.
Yeah.
That's also
but it's
where
not
like
yellowish
the overall
like the doppelganger one.
It's not yellowish like the doppelganger. It's not white like the overall like evolution of the arm normal. It's obsidian. So there's all sorts of colors you can go for this. You have all sorts of variety of these overall weird potato things you can put in the gotcha balls. Little jelly beans. Don't put this in your mouth, please.
It's related to batteries. You shouldn't put batteries in your mouth.
But when he sees like that start to emit from the overall mouth, Philip Gerard ends up shielding his eyes and looking away before like there seems to be some form of flash, and only the gold ball seems to remain.
Well, the gold ball pops back in, the gold orb, and then like the rock shrivels down, and it's almost like the orb follows the shriveling thing off screen. And then it's just the gold orb. It's like the gold orb like defeated the other one.
And Philip Gerard ends up picking up, which the more that I think about Philip Gerard and his overall actions and movements, I would argue that the points that we've seen sort of like Mike and has addressed himself as Mike as something of somewhat that's a little bit more confident, deep voiced, and sort of like ready. I would argue that some of the overall gestures and sort of like the hunched posture of this individual does give off more Philip Gerard vibes, if you will, being someone who is a bit more timid.
Yeah, and then but then at that point though, what happened to the spirit of Mike? What does it say that Philip Gerard is the active agent?
Is it one and the same?
Yeah, it gets to be a bit tricky unless you have any particular thoughts.
No thoughts at the moment, just more so observations.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, the Golden Orb, Philip Gerard picks it up. I don't know if he's going to play marbles with it or something later. It does remind me a bit of alchemy, maybe? Like the idea of like equivalent exchange, the idea of turning things into gold.
Why is Dougie worth one tiny gold pachinko ball?
One Dougie is one battery is one golden pachinko ball. It's basic maths.
What?
Did you not learn Common Core maths?
System are we working with?
This is the Common Core maths. It's like when you're doing those word problems in the math textbook, and it just starts to get really confusing and weird. Like, why does Jimmy have 12 elephants? It's a similar situation as that, you know?
Why does Jimmy have 12 elephants?
Why does he? What's he going to do with all those elephants? What's Jimmy going to do with one elephant?
What is Philip Gerard going to be doing with a small ball? But regardless, the ring is still returned to the pedestal, which does potentially...
The Formica table.
The Formica table.
To be clear.
Yes, which does question, say, for example, even though time makes no sense, if you will, is there ever a point where two rings can coexist in an overall timeline? That's a genuine curiosity.
We haven't seen that yet.
Not yet.
And, you know, with the idea that Dougie was manufactured for a purpose, and that purpose seems to have been something involved with Dale Cooper and kind of creating a loophole situation.
Yeah.
Do you then attribute who made this? Who made Dougie? Who's the manufacturer? Is it Duracell? Is it Energizer?
It could be an entity from the Mauve Room. It could be something of a Mr. C situation. It could be a third party that we don't know about. In fact, there's even points where I'm looking at Dougie Coop that does get produced afterwards and get suspicious because Dougie has long, floppish hair. Like it's not completely the same as Mr. C, but it's notable that this person can grow out their hair and they can grow it out quite well. To say that if it's future and if it's past, what could potentially happen between what we've seen in the past and in the future, that's potentially an amount of years that still is unknown to me, if my beliefs are true. So what could have happened to this Dougie Coop that could be leading to Mr. C, or is Mr. C in fact still Bob Coop? Like, there's a lot of
you're
malleable...
speculating if Dougie or Dougie Coop becomes Mr. C?
If
probably not Dougie Coop, because Dougie Coop looks like Cooper.
Dougie Coop looks like Cooper for now. But
for now,
like, remember that this is played by the same actor.
Right. So you're wondering if they're all three one and the same. I'm
wondering if, as Cooper is merging with Dougie, if that will have any physical after effects.
Okay.
If he's going to fall in line with the Dougie lifestyle, or is he going to move into Cooper lifestyle? Because when we eventually get Cooper inside of here, he's parroting for almost the entire session.
Right. So that's
his personality
didn't
pop out
Dougie
yet.
Coop, because it isn't acting like Dale Cooper.
Yeah.
So, okay, I will say, without giving, again, I can't really talk about my own thoughts too much.
Very well.
I would say that Mr. C benefits if he was the person who either made Dougie or was involved in the process, because Mr. C doesn't want to go back to the Red Room, and it seems like because Dale Cooper replaced Dougie, he didn't replace Mr. C. So it seems like Mr. C benefits whoever did this. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, yes.
You know, that doesn't necessarily mean he's the one responsible. Like, I benefit for the existence of soy-based vegetarian meat replacements. But that does not mean I'm the inventor of Beyond Meat or any of these other awesome burgers.
But you also have not denied that.
I have not. Look, listener, you cannot prove anything.
You can't prove anything.
No one will believe you.
No one will believe you.
If you go to the local law enforcement and say that Kalil invented the awesome burger, you can't prove anything.
I feel like for some reason, like aesthetically speaking, something mystical is happening to the listener right now, where like the charger has unplugged from the wall outlet.
Oh god,
and is,
chargers
like,
are being added to the situation now.
And is now at the throat of the listener. You can't prove anything with this very dull, tiny charger. It's a fun visual, to say the least.
So most of the time with Kyle MacLachlan in these two parts is with this character of Dougie Coop. Personality-wise, there ain't much here to really talk about, because the only speaking lines he has, with one exception, are all just parroting off of what other people have said, with some semblance of awareness. Like, for example, when someone refers to him as Dougie, he does seem to understand that he's Dougie.
Either he does understand, or he's trying to communicate, if you will, and trying to cement the knowledge in his head, being like, Dougie, like almost like a Tarzan Jane situation.
Very much, it seems like trying to, though. It's not thoughtless. It does seem to be that there is an indication that he is trying to like use the phrases that he was given to the best of his ability to make meaningful thoughts and meaningful responses. He only can use, though, what he's given.
He can only use what he's given,
with
and
one exception.
For the most part, like, what do you do with like your arm movements when you're strapped in for a roller coaster ride?
Yeah.
Like, how much control does Dougie Coop have?
So the overwhelming thing that keeps happening, I would say, is that Dougie Cooper clearly needs help.
Yes.
And one of the first phrases he's given by Jade when she gives him $5 and drops him off at the casino is, hey, call for some help.
Which, by the way, before we go too far with it, just a note with shoes, she puts on Dougie's shoes on Cooper's feet.
Yes.
Like putting on some new shoes.
I don't think Dougie Coop's.
She puts on Dougie Coop's shoes.
She puts on Dale Cooper's shoes onto Dougie Coop.
She puts on Dougie Coop's shoes onto...
Well,
wait, she
not
puts
Dale
Dougie's...
Cooper's.
Yep, she puts...
Dougie's shoes.
There we go.
Ah!
Yeah, this is only going to get...
suffering.
Either easier or harder as we go along. We'll find out along the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dougie's shoes are now onto Dougie Coop. Don't know if you clack 3 times if he'll go home. But in any case, he's then shunted like through the overall car and is like driven off.
What if all of this is just you have to walk a mile in someone else's shoes? And that's all the reason that the shoes are a thing, is because he was leaving his old idea of Dale Cooper to then become the Dougie, so you have to switch pairs of shoes.
Potentially, we literally leave Sycamore Street, so...
Yeah, we get Sycamore Street, And then we get other street names referenced later that Dougie lives on, like, Lancelot Court, and there's also a Merlin thing related to that.
Yeah, because we've never had, like, these overall, like, Merlin Knights or anything like that.
Now we're getting Glastonbury Grove vibes,
yeah.
right? So you get sycamores, you get the King Arthur sort of mythology, and there are other things, right? So the one exception to Dougie's speech rule is that when he has coffee, for the first time as Dougie Coop that we see, he immediately says, hi.
Yep, and no one has said hi to him.
No one has said hi to him as far as we can tell.
Yes.
So that is the first original comment. Now, he didn't go out and say damn good, so we don't know what synapses are firing to get the hi out of there. But there is a sense in which he does have some spark. Now, why do you think coffee does that to him?
So, moving on to this overall path, I think that for the most part, Cooper is getting fitted into his overall skin. I think that I think for the most part, a lot of the language that is produced from Cooper sort of like growing and just trying to continue to process as this individual, Dougie Coop. For one, a lot of it seems to be processed when he's back home inside the point that is the most familiar. Inside the zone that was happening with the Silver Mustang, was it?
Yes.
The Silver Mustang?
Which has its own, like, host of loaded language, because when I think of a Silver Mustang, I think of a white horse.
Exactly. This one did not seem to be death quite yet, though. But for the entire duration of him being there, it was just still parrot. Nothing had changed on this overall character. When he gets home and the Red Room finds him, if you will, and says, like, you're not supposed to be here, one of you has to die, and, like, sends that message to him, he suddenly has an urge to pee. And by that point of release, if you will, we see him move around more. He seems to be able, he was extremely stiff through the entire time the Silver Mustang, but for the most part, he's actually moving. He's actually emoting a little bit more. And when he comes back down to the overall staircase and he's, like, working through things and he has a pit of liquid goes into his mouth, he spits out. Between pissing, between, like, having the liquid come out, and between, like, puking, if you will, I don't think it's something which, like, yeah, when he does these actions, it unlocks a new phase. I think that these are just certain checkpoints that people can look into to see where, like, more of this personality is coming out, whether it is Dougie,
so you
whether
don't think
it is
it's
Cooper.
the coffee specifically, more so it's the transference of fluid?
I think it is the transference of fluid is caused by the integration of something familiar, if you will, whether it is from Dougie's life or Cooper's life. So in this case,
when I think of Dale Cooper, I think of two things: coffee and peeing. Those are always the two things I think about with this guy.
In this case, the familiar as well as the finally, like, lapsed connection with the Red Room, where, like, someone from the Red Room is directly speaking to him, that familiarity then unlocks more inside of Cooper's head, or Dougie Coop's, in which he's able to then release all the overall functions, followed by the usage of coffee, which is also familiar with the Red Room, being that overall, like, fun little coffee moment. He lets that in, and immediately it's exuded out as he's able to emote more. Will he be able to finish the cup? We'll find out next episode, maybe. But in any case, the rejection of something inside of you being able to process a sense of growth might have a theme here.
Okay. I'm going to interrupt us talking about Dougie because the show interrupts talking about Dougie to have this little scene while Dougie is on his way to the Silver Mustang where we go to this house near it's across the street from where Jade was with Dougie, and it's this woman repeating 119.
119, 119 inside this space after, like, this little child is looking at this one man putting something under Dougie's car.
Looking like a little bit of a bomb, potentially.
Looks like potentially a bomb, could be a tracker, could be, like, something very nasty. But notably, that was from one of the two people trying to assassinate Dougie. It seems Dougie is a little bit too far into some sort of sauce that we don't know about.
Okay, so you think that the assassins are working for someone related to what Janie E was talking about owing money?
Potentially, yes. I think that that's the only leading factor at this time.
Okay.
Of like, if someone owes money and this person's not going to be paying back that money, or does not seem, and they're just wasting it on their overall pleasures, at that point they might see him as a lost cause, cut the losses, and make things look like an accident or like an unknown.
I can think of one other possibility, but I'll hold back on it if you don't also feel that way.
Very well. But yes, still there is what seems to be antics going on. Maybe there could be a point where like Mr. C doesn't want this to happen, and he's got connections where it's just like, yeah, no, keep an eye on this guy.
Well,
it
I'm
seems
just
like there's
saying
another
that
familiar face.
If Dougie was created to cause the trick for Cooper, Dougie is now gone, and we're left with...
And we're left with overall...
We're left with Dale Cooper in Dougie mode. Wouldn't Mr. C want to kill that guy?
Just try to get rid of it right away. That's another like curiosity I have. I'm looking at overall Dougie Cooper. I'm looking at Mr. C.
Sure.
And how much you would want to try to dispose of this vessel, and how do you confirm when this vessel will come around? How does Mr. C get a text message that's like, oh, it seems that Cooper's here.
Well, probably not getting a text message right now if they're happening concurrently.
Yes.
The problem is we don't know if they're happening concurrently.
Exactly.
Is Mr. C in prison the same day or not?
I don't believe that's the case.
What we can say is that as viewers, we are shown a direct parallel between Mr. C suppressing the vomit and original Dougie emitting the vomit.
Yes.
Does that mean that these two plot lines are in sync chronologically or not? You could argue something, because Annie showed up to Laura in the past.
Yep, lying down, that was a future event dispersed with past event to share a message that was not fully received.
So is it possible that they're not even happening at the same time? Yeah, it still is.
Yeah.
So raises a lot of questions there potentially. Anyway, we're not talking about that. We're talking about 119.
119, it's literally... Okay, if I had to guess... You
have to. You must.
It's 911 backwards.
What?
Like, I don't...
Prove it. Cite your sources.
Okay, I want you to... Okay, follow along with me.
Okay.
119.
Okay, one and one is 2. Mm-hmm. 2 plus 9.
No, I didn't tell you to do
11.
anything. You're already doing things with...
Ocean's 11.
Just keep it on the table. Keep it on the table.
7-11?
I want you to take the 9, take the 1.
Okay.
And I want you to pick them up. Okay.
9 and 1. Okay.
All right, and put them on opposite ends of the table.
Okay, then the 9 becomes a 6, and the
No,
1 stays the
I
same.
didn't say flip it.
Okay, but you have...
No, not flip it. Just opposite ends of the table. You just mix it around. 911. No, something dangerous is happening inside the background. She's literally having drugs, alcohol, like the whole 9 yards of like items going on right there. And going 119, 119. It sounds like there is something urgent going on in the background. This is just to add to that overall moment and momentum to show this is bad.
So who is she saying 911 for? For herself? For her son? For Dougie? For Dale Cooper? For the audience? For anyone?
She's a megaphone for the audience, I'm taking it.
So the audience is in danger.
No, the audience is not in danger. It's just to let you know, like a siren going off, that there is danger abound. In this case, it's focusing on the overall thing being put underneath Dougie's car.
Okay.
That is almost like very much cementing the Chekhov's gun, being like, emergency, this is bad, but also will likely be brought up later on. This is not going to be like Dougie completely will never have his car again, or no one will ever use Dougie's car again. That's just a bad situation right there waiting to happen.
As far as other things that are possibly influencing here, she does have, like you said, the pill bottles, and there's one pill left in one of the bottles. She has a lighter, an ashtray, a bobby pin, a bottle of some kind of alcohol, and she does have playing cards. And this is like the third, I think, time we've seen playing cards. Yes. Although in this case, it is next to what looks like a white powder on the counter, likely going to be cocaine. The cards may have just been to cut the drugs. Mm-hmm. I don't think Lucy at the sheriff's department was cutting cocaine with her cards.
As far as we know right now. But no, it seems for the most part, a lot of this stuff that's laid out on the table is like laid out almost ceremoniously, if you will. Mm-hmm. The single pill is put at the overall center. There's a slow pour of the overall liquid off to the side. I could see this paralleling with a common overall movie scene of like lighting candles and being prepared for an overall prayer, if you will. It seems that this is a common thing that this person does. It is something repeated in a way and revered as something of a potential release of something maybe even paralleled in a spiritual nature, if you will. This is something that gives them that form of release, but it is in a more darker nature, if you will. And hence using the reverse speech 119 parallels with the processing chamber like the Red Room, in which people speak in reverse, if you will.
I will just say that seeing all these playing cards in the early episodes of The Return does hit a bit different after just watching The Manchurian Candidate for the first time, the original version of Manchurian Candidate, where playing cards, mild spoilers for The Manchurian Candidate, are associated with basically people who've been like psyoped and mind controlled. So what they'll do is they'll say like, why don't you spend some time playing solitaire, and then the guy will go into solitaire mode where he's like highly influential to orders. So just imagine like Lucy's on the phone. Hello, Twin Peaks Sheriff Department. Why don't you play some solitaire? Okay. Kill Dale Cooper. Like I'm just imagining like all these situations,
Gods. It could be. Like, I don't know how Manchurian was influential for David Lynch, but
I mean, there is someone I think named Josie in there, but at this point, every classic film that I watched, especially the ones that are in black and white, I'm looking at it. And I'm wondering. I mostly joke, but I will say it's on my mind. You want to know who's on the slots, though? Who's hitting the slots?
Who's
punching the slot machines?
It's this elderly lady who seems to be angry at the world.
Yes. I think she is in the credits as, I want to say it's elderly slot addict.
I think it's elderly slot addict. First name elderly, last name Daddict.
Daddict?
Daddict.
I have questions. So, Dougie Coop is led by visions of the Red Room, presumably, to go to different slot machines, pull the lever, go, hello, because someone else did that. And then he wins so much money, but just keeps like walking away from it.
Yep, he's like a parroting, if you will, seeing one person win the jackpot. And for some reason, like he's then able to see these little like visions of other jackpots. And he's just like doing the same actions as if it's like a ritual to evoke a jackpot to come.
Strange man learns one neat trick to win millions. Casinos hate him.
Hello! One notable thing is any person that sees him from this point on, the most action we get is that his old friends, apparently,
Bill Shaker.
And his wife.
Who knows him apparently from Allied Chemicals. And, chemicals have a positive relationship with Twin Peaks for sure. Mm-hmm. Bill Shaker from Allied Chemicals and his wife, who the credits call Candy Shaker.
I'm sure that was very funny at the wedding, if you will. Ha 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 ha. Anyway. She's probably the one that gives the most, I would say, genuine response, but she's not someone who's still doing any action. But whilst her husband seems to be ignoring a lot of the red flags and is more so like leading the conversation with him, being like, no.
Wait, hold on a second. Bill Shaker. That's someone who shakes and waves dollar bills.
Ha!
Right?
Yeah, Bill Shaker, which could be like waves money in your face. Literally found in a casino. Yeah. And also inside of business attire. Candy Shaker. We'll get back to that. There's likely pun work being handled here.
Yeah, very likely. Also, there's enough Bills and Billies and Wills and
Regardless, like it seems that Bill is leading the conversation, if you will. Yeah. He's like saying like, no, yeah, you know this, right? And then he's like clearly not knowing it, and he's just like parroting. He's like, no, you're the guy that lives at the Red Door, and it's out in Lancelot Court, and oh no, there's cabs outside. It's like it's not leading him onto a point. But one of my favorite lines is like towards the end because Candy is constantly like, are you okay? Is everything okay? Do you need anything? Like, is everything okay? When he does walk away, he's like she's very convinced. She's like, he likely needs help. He might need some else. Like, yeah. And then Bill goes on. He's like, yeah, I hope he's okay. Almost as if he's still staying in that positive tone of like being like, yeah, I do hope that this is the case, as opposed to like, this is not the case. This is something to be worried about. But it's still the difference between someone who is keeping himself blissfully unaware as versus with someone who is knowing that there's some sort of action going, but both actively do nothing. There could be something said about that.
So do you say something about that?
I say, for the most part, no one helps anyone else in whatever place we're at. Like, no one helps each other really inside of Twin Peaks unless it's on some sort of like law-based. Elsewise, it's still keeping on a status quo. I'm saying the status quo of Dougie is still plain right overall here. And anything that sort of like shakes up.
Is it like satire? Like, is this reaching the point of social commentary through satire?
I think it could be argued at the moment.
Because, I mean, in real life, do you think that people wouldn't help him? Your opinion.
My opinion?
If you plop Dougie into a real casino.
Time and place. It really depends on the time and place. This place does not seem, at the current surface level, seedy enough that I think that no one would help him. I think that in this particular location, that someone would help him. I know of certain elements, thanks to love them to death with my overall family, but my family have even looked onto those who are in need and order all sense of help and see more so the potential negatives that can come from it, the overall potential scams one can go through, and the potential, like, they will do nothing with that, so it's best to ignore. It's something that I deeply disagree with,
just
but
make sure
it's
I
something
understand
that
they don't trust these people because they're going to scam them.
they are either going to scam them or they will not do anything with the resources helpful, so they are oftentimes overlooked.
Because usually when I think of this sort of commentary, I think of a lot of ways, at least in America, that the homeless are treated. And you have situations where people who are without residence, who do not have a home, are oftentimes viewed by those who are unwilling or uninterested in showing compassion to them as almost all addicts, as almost all lazy, as almost all, et cetera, insert negative pejorative here.
Yes.
And you look no further than how, like, parks handle their benches, right? To prevent homeless people from sleeping on them.
Yep.
There are things you can get into. However, the Dougie situation, I would argue, is not as common of what I think about when I think of these things. This feels a bit more exaggerated in a different kind of way. There are real examples of people treating those who need help with disdain. I don't know if this is one of those situations.
It really depends on, like, how far do you go for the slot machine addict, someone who also seems to need potential additional aid, someone who is being thrown into the overall system and is not being assisted with. Instead, and she resents it seems, and is very spiteful towards it. This system is not actively helping her out, and when there is a blessing that she is actively being helped, there's many cases where one could be putting Mr. Jackpots as a messiah-like figure, this overall prophet-like figure, this overall being that is giving forward fortune, and she's even coming up clamoring like, Mr. Jackpot, Miss Jackpot, please tell me where I can find this now. Just like almost in a begging like fashion, which I don't see her doing anywhere else.
Right.
She's pissed off at everything else.
Well, we don't get much of her to have anything else.
We don't.
What I would also argue with that, though, is you could read her as a victim of a system that is not benefiting her situation, and you could look at that with sympathy, but you could also flip the table on that and look at her as someone who's jealous and angry until it benefits her. That she's two-faced. And that reasserts a narrative about the poor.
Yep.
So which one is David Lynch going for here?
Is David Lynch just
or
going for one?
Or is he not even going for anything?
Is he not going for that? Is he going for both? Is he going for one? That is a whole pile of things in which I think David Lynch would respond with, what do you think?
Well, do you think she's positively or negatively portrayed? Because I would say negative, if I could just jump in with that opinion.
From my overall insight onto it, I think that it is very... I think it's either negative or neutral, because in the sense that it's neutral, it's because the things that she's flipping off, the things that she's, like, pissed at, there's good reason for her to be pissed at. It seems that this house is not exactly all too kind with overall the idea of, like, their winnings kind of, like, departing from them. They are not too overall kind in the respects of how they try to intimidate Dougie Coop.
I mean,
it's and you know what? They can be fair in that overall point.
I'll hold back.
But electricity with the overall usage of these overall people that are on that higher up echelon, if there's any common things that we're going to be doing with a society of individuals that are letting people such as the addict overall inside the overall doors to continue this overall behavior, I can say that likely there's going to be more negative light to be shined onto there, and hence why this person might be a victim as much as they are by perpetuity of the things that have also become an aggressor thanks to the aggressions they face inside the outside world.
Okay, I mostly am curious, is there anything else you think that's important to note about everything at the Silver Mustang? Any of the conversations or moments there? Anything else before we go to the limo?
There's over 30 jackpots, mega jackpots that were won. Not just regular jackpots, mega jackpots that were won to make it into a point of hyperbole. At that point, like, the numbers don't matter anymore. Like, there's so much being lost from this casino. They're obviously concerned, and they want to try to catch them into an act of potentially stealing, to the point that with Dougie Coop still sort of like doing that parrot mode and even mirroring the physical actions of this guy pushing a bag of money to him. It seems that they really want him back for that sake. And there is an idea that floats inside of my head. If Dougie Coop has this ability to see these fortunes, if a casino is challenging him to be pushed into the situation and for him to accrue money and or infamy inside of this overall sect. We saw a Vegas scene with Mr. Todd earlier. And to say that you hope you never meet a guy like this may not refer to Mr. C, but for whatever things are being moved forward could be argued for potentially Dougie Coop, if you will. So now it's starting to divide because Dougie Coop is actively in Vegas. Mr. C is all the way in South Dakota. How much of that is separated? How long does Mr. C be in Vegas? But Mr. C hasn't touched Vegas yet as far as like runtime is concerned.
I'm just imagining a situation in which someone is being held at gunpoint by Dougie Coop, and Dougie Coop just points the gun at him and says, "Call for help." And the guy just starts screaming and just shoots him down. Like,
No, it's better if he's just like, "Hello!" And then he hits the jackpot. Whoever the jackpot
maybe instead
is.
of a gun, maybe we pull like the Shining thing, so he has the axe. So he breaks the axe through the door, "Hello!" as he peeks his head through the door. And then when he enters with the axe, then it's call for help.
We're writing a new narrative on top of here. If anyone can overall splice the Shining in with Dougie Coop, I think that it would have entertaining results.
For sure. Okay, so we're at the limo. Awkward, fortunate situation for that limo driver who has to deal with figuring out what to do in this exact situation with Dougie Coop.
What I will say very notably inside of this, like this overall scene, for the most part, he's non-emotive, Dougie Coop. He's just like sitting forward and just like looking outside the window. What do we do when literally when the door is about to open, like when the driver sort of like leaves the situation, he's looking into this overall dark reflection right in front of dark reflection, referring to the dark windows, potentially seeing his own reflection and looking out to the door where he gasps before the door is open. What do you do with that? I'm still trying to figure out what do I do with that. Does he see something additional that I don't know about? Is it just reflexive? Again, it's one of those points where like there is something extra being given that I don't know what to do with.
We also get an owl around this time.
Yep. Literally standing outside, we see an owl fly overhead.
Which I give David Lynch credit for at least holding back on the owl as long as he did, because I think a lot of Twin Peaks material leans so much into the owls that it gets kind of redundant and uninteresting after a while.
But Kalil, be honest with me. Don't you miss the days where you could have like 20 different postcards for owls featured onto the overall counter space?
No.
In your hotel?
No. Find new things. And David Lynch has found new things. The glass box, the experiment, the mauve zone, they're different things. Even the evolution of the arm, it's something new. So the owl, we get an owl at night before he goes into his house, and then when he is in that house...
Referring to Dougie Coop getting into his house, not the owl going into his house.
No, correct. The owl does not knock on the door and walk in. But no, the next morning at that same residence, when he's having that coffee and pancakes with Sonny Jim, there are orange owl cookie pots.
There are orange owl cookie pots, and that is adorable.
An owl outside the house, owl representations inside the house. This is the most owl content we've got in the return, and it is centered around this residence.
Yes.
With a red door.
Yes.
And you're telling me you're not interested in that.
I think that I'm interested in it. But there's a lot of interesting things mythically going on. The biggest thing I want to lead into, as we talk more about it, is that when we enter the overall home with the wife who's very pissed off, we see balloons everywhere.
Yeah.
Remember balloons. And the most notable thing is that what was missed was Sonny Jim's birthday.
Yes.
Balloons everywhere, balloon association with Pierre and Sonny Jim, and then Pierre and Sonny Jim, Pierre notably being that mystical overall was from the Red Room. And this potentially...
Not necessarily.
But not necessarily. His overall image.
We know there's something magical. We know he does appear in some formats under the mask, potentially at the meeting. So, like, maybe he's involved, but it's not clear he's from the Red Room.
He's at the meetings. He's standing inside of the room before flicking on the overall light switch before you enter beyond the curtains. He's at the very least flirting with the ideas of the overall Red Room. And to say that there could be a mythical thing happening with Sonny Jim, too, I think that that's also very noble. I think that there's a lot of terminology and things going on with the overall Red Room that when Cooper Dougie Coop, whoever you want to call him, enters this place, that's when a lot of things start returning to him. That's where, like, the Red Room ends up finding him.
Sure.
That's where he's able to release himself. That's where he's able to drink some coffee. There is a lot to deal with this place. And maybe that is where Dougie Coop was also introduced. How real is even the wife as well as the child? I'm going to be waiting on
They
that.
have perfectly normal American names like Janie E. and Sonny Jim. I don't know what you're trying to insinuate.
I'm trying to insinuate that every single person is suspicious, especially in this residence.
So, okay.
And the fact that it's like a little kid and a woman. I'd like, sure, the woman was much older, if you will, between like Pierre as well as like.
Oh, you're going that direction. Wow. Okay. Sorry. I'm caught off
There's
guard.
a lot of parallels here
Okay,
with the overall prior family.
I will. I don't know how to respond to that. The actor who plays Janie E. I can't remember if we did the previous podcast. Have I told you or not? Did I tell you? Did I talk to you about that?
I don't think. No.
Okay, somehow I managed to miss that. So do you want to know who the actor is who plays Janie E?
Please.
Naomi Watts.
Oh,
So that is the main actor from the movie Mulholland Drive.
that's the actor from Mulholland Drive. Exciting. Absolutely exciting.
Who doesn't she play a Diane in that movie as well?
She does. She plays someone who has two different personalities, two different places. If we connect with the woman involved with the situation next to Harold's home, if you will,
Right.
there's like two
I'm
separate
just saying
women
you can
that
do
exist
things
with
with
names.
that.
You could do things
So
with that.
this is Naomi Watts in Twin Peaks.
Yes, it's someone that has played a parallel role in the side of the past, now currently has a small child, and potentially could play a parallel role here. Again, that's a lot of cards on the table. That's a 52 pickup right here.
There's
and
so
I'm
many
thinking of a lot of
cards. We
things.
just keep seeing all these cards in the return.
And there's so many balloons there. And I'm wondering when Sonny Jim's head will pop too.
Sonny Jim, how do you feel about his reaction to his father being gone for 3 days, missing his birthday party, and then just showing up,
I think
acting like this?
I think that's where like the additional suspicion comes in. Like it seems that it could be a little like fun romp with this little kid just like being playful with something that like he sees what other adults don't see, or he's just having fun with this overall like playfulness that maybe he thinks his father's leading on. I'm leading to the former more than the latter, just because it seems for the most part like a lot of the reactions are things I don't expect from a kid. Maybe they just don't write kids like they used to. But I've never seen a child give a thumbs up.
2017, is that the used to, or what's the used to?
I don't know, but this does not seem like a child to me for the most part. It seems like a very leading figure. For one, like the thumbs up. I've never seen a child thumbs up. I don't remember thumbs up when I was a kid. I don't remember that. Regardless, like when you greet your father, do you give him a thumbs up?
I think that's very funny that's the sticking point for you.
It's a big sticking point. And when the thumbs up comes through and he does like that little fun turnaround, if you will, and the kid laughs and it goes downstairs, and then the kid knows that like he's got to like help out with the little bits of the maple syrup. I think it's either A, very cute scene, or B, something suspicious and nefarious. Maybe we've already known
both.
Maybe both.
Cute and nefarious.
Cute and nefarious.
That sounds like a great like t-shirt you would give like a toddler, like one of those like graphic tees. Mm-hmm. Cute and nefarious.
It's amazing because I know for a fact how insane I sound. I know for a fact that these don't actually correlate in a way.
You may
but I would be
think
dishonest.
The professor's gone insane, but he will kill again.
But I would be dishonest if I didn't say that these are sticking points in my brain.
Yeah,
that this is weird to me.
Last thing I can throw out that maybe would be useful, if you but you seem to not care about the owls, is that I have difficulty.
These around the owls. I'm sorry.
I have difficulty telling the difference between red and orange, and so I admit I'm a little stuck on this. But the owl cookie jar in the background is like in the shade of kind of the kitchen area, I think, and
Yeah.
it looks to me like an orangish color. And Sonny Jim is wearing a jacket that's either orange or red, depending on your color scheme.
Yep.
I can't tell if Sonny Jim is wearing the same color that owl is or not.
I just think that even being in the vicinity of owls makes you suspicious of being owls.
It is a background detail of the owl, but it's like I also feel like an owl cookie jar is so specific. I can't. what are the odds that David Lynch asked someone on the crew, okay, prop master, I want a cookie jar. Doesn't matter what kind of cookie jar, I just want a cookie jar in the background.
And they go to Walmart and like, will this be hilarious? And just grabs the owl cookie jar. No, I genuinely...
What are the odds?
I do feel that either David Lynch or someone came across it and that was something very cool and they wanted it specifically here because I think with especially the owl being overhead and the owl being in the house, it's showing that overall potential mystical connection. I think the Sonny Jim Pierre thing is...
The rainbow connection.
A rainbow connection, I guess, but...
I watched the Muppet movie recently.
Adorable. I think that genuinely David Lynch is playing with names in a way that does show that this is a mythical household. Like, the only one that makes me very much question it most of all is the wife. Because for the wife, for one, like, sure, she's, like, letting everything sort of, like, pass by her, in which, like, the weirdness that Dougie Coop is giving, like, she's just sort of, like, letting pass by in the wave, in which Candy seems to have more of a reaction to his overall state more than she does.
That
this
makes
seems
it
to be a
seem
larger
like Dougie is acting normal, but that doesn't reflect the Dougie we met for, like, the 5 minutes.
There's still like notes inside there in which like you're not even clothed, but she does make a note that she can never get the tie right, so she has clothed him before, but it also notes that Dougie Coop could tie a tie, and this Dougie Coop cannot tie a tie. He wears it very nicely on his head though.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like mixed implications that Naomi Watts' character is very, very, very curious on like where this like family dynamic and where more theories will go.
Speaking of theories about mysterious, suspicious characters, Gordon Cole and the FBI.
Yeah, very suspicious, very horrifying, very horrible. Let's just put Gordon Cole away. Maybe if we ignore Gordon Cole enough, he'll just disappear from the return. Maybe he'll go away.
We need to probe some things.
No.
So our introduction here is at a roundtable discussion with some different agents.
It's actually a rectangle table.
And on the table is some evidence to a case that we don't really know about. Apparently, someone has been accused of brutally murdering this other person's wife, and the person knows who did it, but they can't say because it would breach national security. And so they have to leave clues in their garden for the FBI to piece together to figure out who done it.
And the clues are along the lines of what seems to be a very sexualized photo of a woman. It seems to be
It's a woman in a thong and high heels.
Mm-hmm. There seems to be a gun involved. There seems to be a...
When I walk around in a thong and high heels, it's not sexualized. It's creepy and weird, and get out of my Walmart.
Hey, if you want to be inside of your overall thong and also do that, you know what? You'll be you. Defy Walmart in that case. Be you. But we also have a little postcard that also features two women in bikinis. We see a gun. We see a picture of
gun with a silencer.
Gun with a silencer, thank you. We see a child, quote,
a clearly Photoshop sailor child.
Yes, and we also have a jar of what seems to be tiny rocks.
Small white rocks and pliers.
And a pair of pliers.
So, is the child more, less, or equally Photoshopped as the Wally Brando photo that Lucy has?
If you had a quantifiable amount of Photoshop, I think that the one Lucy has more Photoshop in it.
It's more Photoshopped?
But this one still has a fair amount of Photoshop.
It's uncanny.
Into it.
There's something like uncanny about that photo.
There's so many uncanny things about children. Maybe almost to direct your eyes at the child who might be uncanny themselves. Because there's one child currently here. You could technically say Wally, but he's 24. He's 24. He's no longer a child.
Well,
focus on the uncanny
to the
child.
American healthcare system, you could be under your parents' healthcare until you're 26.
He's not a child, though.
Anyway.
He can go to war.
So we get a woman in a thong and high heels, two sunbathing women, a set of pliers, a Photoshop sailor child, a gun with a silencer on it, and a small jar of white rocks.
Yes.
Is this where we do the Madagascar Kowalski analysis?
What's there to analyze? For the most part, it seems like, for one, if there's a sexually clad overall photo, like, if it has anything to do with sex, there's probably been an affair, or there has been, like, an overall end of lust involved there. If you have to deal with something with pliers, maybe it's something that has to really, like, dig at the root and have to be, like, use force to yank out. If you end up having something along the lines of a small child, there probably was a child involved, or some form of innocence if you want to parallel that. And if you want to play with Say, for example, a jar of tiny rocks, maybe that's a memento from a journey, as if they went to some far-off place. In any case, this is far different from the Lil scene from Fire Walk With Me, because the Lil scene we were walked through. In this case, there's a lot of loose ends here.
We were fire walked through.
We were fire walked through. There's a lot of loose ends here that are quickly sort of like shoved aside for the plot to continue.
Nope, this job is given to some other people to work on, and they're going to go to New York, the rest of them.
Yes.
So, do you think we're going to return to this?
I think that we are going to see parallels with this, but I don't think that that will be fully utilized, or it's going to be utilized in the background.
Okay.
I think it'll be potentially a weird B-plot situation, or it'll parallel with what we have going forward. But at the current case, at this current time, it's a series of information that's most curious.
Okay. And like I was saying, Gordon Cole is going to get these people to work on this while he goes to talk to Tammy and gets Albert involved, and they're going to go on this whole entire adventure separately.
Tammy. That sounds familiar, doesn't it, Kalil?
Well, considering I did go out of my way to kind of tell you things that maybe I don't know if I was supposed to or not. Yeah, I did point it out to you off pod when we watched it.
Agent Tammy Preston.
Tamara Preston. That's the same person from The Secret History of Twin Peaks, at least by name.
By name. We're making this very, very, very clear, or at the very least, I'm going to make it very, very clear, and I will overemphasize myself if I have to. Only by name.
So you should say the controversial hot takes so then I can just say yes. I'm not the one complaining. I'm just agreeing with your complaints, for the record.
Between Jade's overall position and her overall, presentation being completely nude as an introduction, if you will.
The sex worker from earlier.
Sex worker, holding over Dougie, with Dougie being almost entirely clothed at the time. From these overall multiple photographs, from the controversy that our dear Gordon Cole is involved with, from the overall eye shot and comments made by even Albert Rosenfeld, from the way that Agent TP walks and the fact that there's not really much given from Agent TP other than she's vaguely got the stuff. There is, and also, again, the photos, if you will, that are on the overall presented table. There's a lot of heavy amounts of male-gazy stuff going on here that has no anywhere equivalent outside. And also, if you ended up cutting some of them completely out, I do feel that there's a lot of communication that would still be represented the same, or even add on, if you will. So, say, for example, if good old Dougie ended up being overall naked himself overall inside the room, would that take away from the moment? No, I think that it shows that they still had the sexy time, if you will. Maybe he'd have to put on a little bit extra clothes and a little bit of cutaways here and there, but fine. But for the most part, there's nothing really to
and then you go parts 1 and 2, you bring back in that we had nudity for Tracy, but not for Sam.
Exactly. It seems that for the most part, it's complimentary only to the overall male gaze. Maybe there's some sort of form of commentary to go for that, but especially with Gordon Cole's sort of reaction to some things with the new head of the FBI, or his superior, I'm leaning that, and also the scene inside of Inland Empire that seems very weird and suspicious.
Oh, the one with the breasts.
The flashing of the overall breasts.
Yeah.
I do feel that there is a sense of perversion that comes out through what David Lynch is putting forward that I do not see any. I don't feel positive about it.
I will say I haven't looked at it, but I do know David Lynch did do a nude collection. He did do nude photography.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure that's exclusively female. I could be wrong. I don't have it.
Okay.
I'm not sure. So I think maybe you could argue that he does find beauty in the female form type of idea. I find that line of reasoning doesn't go very far to explain away a lot of things.
At the end of the day, for myself, for my own overall preferences, and for just seeing a lot of this overall media already inside of a pretty gross light, it does seem exploitative without having much positivity from me.
So Inland Empire is a different thing. So just talking to Twin Peaks now, the sex scenes, I think you could argue that it's weird that the females are nude and not the male. But it also does make sense that if you're having a sex scene, there would be some nudity. You can kind of understand that. That also applies, obviously, for Jade, then.
Yes.
And, the photos, we don't know yet. Maybe the photos are important, that the woman's in the thong and the other two are in the bikinis. But the Agent Tammy Preston one is the one that gets me.
Mm-hmm.
Because when she's walking away from Albert and Gordon Cole after the prison situation, the camera bobs down to look at her waist, I can find no other reason for it to bob down.
It bobs
and then
down.
it goes right back up.
It's not just her waist, though. It's like her ass. Like,
Yeah.
like fully, like, it goes down far enough that the center is
I was
her
being
legs and ass.
polite, but yeah, you're right. And then Albert makes the comment that he feels better now, seemingly in awareness of looking at her butt.
Very known overall, Albert being quite overall interested and quite overall very much trying to evoke this overall passion that we've seen from Albert so long before. All I'm asking at the end of the day with scenes such as this, with the overall representation such as this, why can't I have a sexy Dr. Jacoby here? What about the sexy Dr. Jacoby? Like the desires for the sexy Dr. Jacobys around here.
Yeah, the camera doesn't ogle or pan toward any of the male characters. Like at any given point in the return so far.
Nope.
So how much does this reflect on your overall opinions of Tammy Preston, though? That's more of a criticism of David Lynch's directing here, I think.
It's the one thing that when you're dealing with Tammy Preston and you are telling me that she's got the stuff, and the only thing that you ever show me is her stride, her car sickness, and her lack of responses when sitting in a room.
Mm-hmm.
What is the stuff? What is the stuff that Tammy Preston has got? Because I have nothing on that list. There's nothing on that list that tells me that Tammy Preston is special. Because when I think of someone being special inside of these sort of leagues, I see someone of a leading figure. I see someone such as a Dale Cooper, if you will. If someone's got the stuff, whatever that vague stuff is, I'd point to Dale Cooper, and he makes an impression right off the bat.
Or even Chet Desmond.
Or Chet Desmond. Nothing from this agent, Tammy Preston, have I seen an impression on. And for a lot of that, there's barely any writing for us to overall flex around. There's barely any sort of like emotive points other than being frustrated with Gordon Cole. Like, it's frustrating when we are being told not shown something and it is being withheld for so long.
My issue is that I thought that the Tammy Preston character that Mark Frost wrote for The Secret History of Twin Peaks had a sense of personality. She had a quirk with her whole referencing movies. She was naturally more inquisitive. I never was 100% on board with the Tammy of the Secret History, and I did tell you, sometimes I thought her jumping in may not have helped the book's flow at times, but she had a character. And David Lynch, again, has said he never read Mark Frost's book. I don't know how much Mark Frost was writing for The Return, but I will say that the Tammy that we get in The Return so far, of parts 3 and 4, it doesn't feel like the character that Mark Frost wrote in his book.
It doesn't feel like it, and there could be like overall fun Sam Stanley-esque quirks we could have really added to this character. Something.
Anything.
Like I can imagine like if there's ever a point like she's being very attentive, if we want to do something of a fun addition that can overall help a nice bit of the tone, is that like she's constantly at her computer.
Yeah.
If like she overall like responds in a sense that's like verified, almost as if she's rapid fire, like focusing for one, that shows a quick intuition and a quick means of overall research and a quick means of confidence that I can then say, maybe that's the stuff right there. It could be something along the lines that her overall passion for like movies and film ends up coming out in some means of dialogue in which her overall like focus and being able to piece pieces like that together outright could be something that could vaguely end up in that ends of stuff. It's like, okay, that's interesting. I don't exaggerate when I say Tammy Preston has nothing.
Yeah.
You could replace Tammy Preston with an overall cardboard cutout, guide them around, and the only thing that would overall change is a physical presence.
And so this is where I think it is a fair criticism, because although we've only seen her for, 2 parts or, so much time in The Return, you think about how other agents have been introduced in Twin Peaks before. Dale Cooper's introduction was that car scene where it excellently laid out his character. Albert Rosenfeld, right off the gate, was a very impressionable character when he was in the sheriff's department. We get Chet Desmond and Sam Stanley in Fire Walk With Me very strongly conveyed in only a half hour, but even then, when they first appear...
And let's bring up Philip Jeffries.
Philip Jeffries. We've only had about 5 minutes total with the guy.
I think even less. I think that for the most part, we probably even just had maybe 2.5 minutes because it was constantly flashing.
All of these male agents have very distinct personalities. It does not mean that Agent TP has to be weirder than them to make it do. I just want some sort of personality. Even for example, Albert, 25 years have passed. Maybe his former skepticism and snarkiness went away because people change in 25 years. She could be some of that. It'd be a little bit of copying, but I could see it based on the way that she's a skeptic and always the rational one in the Secret History of Twin Peaks. Mm-hmm. Maybe she's the one looking at all these things and wondering what's going on, and Albert's like, I've been here before. You could do something with that. She's a parallel. She's a mirror. But instead, she's kind of just there. As far as casting goes, she is played by Krista Bell, who is a vocal performer, a singer that David Lynch had previously worked with, had produced some work. So there was a history between the two of them prior to the return.
Yes.
This is someone that David Lynch has worked with before, has a good relationship with. Cool. But I don't think the script is doing her acting any favors.
I don't think that script is doing anything for her. And for the most part, forgive me for pointing this out if it's something that may be going too far. Again, I don't know David Lynch as a person. I don't. I only can go by the positive reception that the people who have worked with him have given.
Which is almost universally positive.
Almost universally positive. But between the situations such as like casting himself as this Gordon Cole figure, and then having Machen a Mech, in which he has been saying very positive, also very, I would say, in the area of flirtatious things about before, having the kissing scene there, and then working very close with this other woman in event, and also having that sort of like, even acknowledged by the overall script itself of Gordon Cole's history of having this older woman and having the overall gaze set onto there, unless they're doing something very big with Gordon Cole that has to deal with Gordon Cole getting some end of judgment and they're setting up that sort of end. If nothing is done with Gordon Cole to counter against this sort of like antics that are happening, especially with his past, then at that point, it's me looking at David and it's like, what is going on here? Like, this is, from my external perspective, a little creepy.
Okay. Yeah, you're saying the things and I'm not, so I feel good about it. I will just say that I agree with a lot of your points, and I just wish, from a very simple standpoint, I wish that Tammy Preston was an interesting and fun character right now from the get-go, because Twin Peaks has had a history of doing that before. David Lynch and Mark Frost have both done that before themselves. There's a lot of opportunity for that. The problem is, you're putting her in the same environment with Gordon Cole and Albert, two characters that fans will recognize and want to experience. She's going to get lost in the shuffle if she doesn't have a strong personality or something.
And I think that, for myself, I think that the biggest problem I do have is the casting of Gordon Cole. I think that the biggest problem I have is with David Lynch taking on that role, because if, say, for example, in this hypothetical universe, they find a different person to fit into the Gordon Cole role, I'd still have problems, but it wouldn't be as intense, because at the very least, I can see a pointedness and I can see a potential fulfilledness that potentially a director might have inside of that position. Yeah, again, not saying that that is what David Lynch is doing. Maybe he does feel like this is the case, and maybe he doesn't even see himself in a fully positive light as well.
Yeah.
But it still is something where I'm looking at someone with the most power inside the work, putting himself inside of positions that deal with attractive females.
Yeah, I'm gonna shrug on this one. I'm gonna say, we've talked before. He's the director of the show. He's the director of the FBI. There's potentially some self-awareness going on here, but whether that amounts to much, I can't say at this juncture.
Very well.
Haha. So Tammy does give some information to them before they even set off on their journey, that they get the images from New York, where clearly Sam and Tracy have seen better days. They had a close shave. They had a close shave all over their face. Snip, 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 all over their face. And they're just bloody pulps at this point. And so clearly Sam and Tracy don't seem like they're coming back anytime soon. Rest in peace, our favorite new characters of the return. And we find all this stuff out about the images, which leads me to wonder, and I'll position to you, if we speculated before that the glass box may be funded by Mr. C, would he want the police and FBI brought in to know these things, or would he try to cover up what happened with Sam and Tracy?
It really does depend on where the hell. One, did the guard just go home? Did something end up affecting the guard, and that made the disappearance? The presence of the guard is important. Number two,
as is the absence.
As well as the absence. Two, the presence of the entity that could be the doppelganger of the woman of the mauve room, and what intentions... Nido. And what intentions could be found there. And also, lastly, number 3, how much in control is Mr. C in this case? If he, like, had the money transferred there, if he had this process there and had that arranged, but he's all the way, like, that's in New York, this is in South Dakota, how much can he feasibly do? Like, how much can we say that this person can do if something like this has gone through?
It could be a contingency plan.
Could be contingency
It could be
plan.
if this, then that. Which, the thing is called the experiment in the credits.
Yeah.
Perhaps it was a foreseeable outcome. There are so many unknowns with your white puzzle that you've been given, your purely blank puzzle, that I don't know if you have a strong guess at this moment. I would just say that you could have imagined a situation in which more effort was put to cover it all up, but instead it seems like right away the police and FBI were given this information if the timeline matches up where it's right away.
Mind you, maybe this person who wasn't using a bathroom break went off to like get like lunch from across the street, and his usual like Uber driver wasn't available to send the Uber Eats up. And he's like, I'm just gonna give myself a sandwich.
This
Goes
is the guard
downstairs.
you're talking about?
From the guard, yes. And then the guard comes back and like literally sees like everything's messed up inside of there. He's like, that could lead into it again.
Yeah, and
enough.
I have my own theories, but at this point, all we would have are theories because of the information we were given. So either case, they get this information about what happened in New York, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but nothing really gets established from that, right? Like, they don't reach any conclusions. They more just acknowledge that information and then proceed with the next task at hand, which is that they believe Dale Cooper has been apprehended by law enforcement in South Dakota.
Yes.
So, presumably unrelated two instances, but correlation, and if we go by Dale Cooper's intuition, sometimes there's something to be said about circumstances and coincidences. Perhaps. Gordon Cole's office, we get an image of it. It's extremely suspicious to fuel your fires, right?
Hi.
A giant nuclear bomb going off.
Big old cloudy mushroom.
I would be suspicious if anyone's personal office contained a reenactment of a nuclear bomb going off.
I would be suspicious if anyone's room had any sort of that. If you had that in your bedroom, I'd be suspicious. If that was in someone's kitchen, I'd be suspicious. Anywhere,
What
that's
about
suspicious.
the director of the FBI?
I wonder.
So, nuclear bombs have had a negative history before. Fire Walk With Me almost involved that from what we were reading. And then we know Secret History of Twin Peaks involves possibly the opening doors to demons and such being associated.
Yes.
So, positive vibes not detected on the wall. Negative vibes instead, perhaps.
Yeah, nope. A nuclear bomb's worth bad vibes.
Opposite that wall is a photo of a literary figure, an author. And again, you don't mind me saying, I'm assuming that is Franz Kafka. Franz Kafka is a surrealist author, most known for his work, The Metamorphosis, which is the story of a guy named Gregor Samsa who wakes up one day and he's a giant bug. It's like a novella. It's a short little thing. You can look at Dougie and something like that as a metamorphosis. Perhaps.
Exactly my thoughts as well. It's something like the biggest ones that I would say.
It could be as simple as real life David Lynch likes Franz Kafka, let's put him on the wall. But because there's a nuclear bomb going off on the other side of the wall.
David Lynch likes nuclear bombs.
That's it. It's just a cute little bomb reference.
No, it's red flags. It is red flags.
Red flags over the place. And they go to South Dakota where they are going to go meet up with Dale Cooper, who of course is the Mr. C variant in the cell. And before they set forth in their journey, though, we get an exchange between Gordon Cole and our familiar friend Denise Bryson.
Yep, Denise Bryson,
who is now a chief of staff.
Who's now chief of staff, recognized as she.
Finally, one thing we can agree upon, I would think, right, is that, and be positive about, is that I think the show, and by proxy, Frost and Lynch, finally gave us clarity as far as Denise's character, because when we were watching the original season 2, we weren't sure, based on the information it was giving us, if we were meant to read Denise as a transgender character or as a man cross-dressing. Both alternatives would be totally fine and totally valid. We just weren't sure what we were being given because it was kind of sending mixed signals and not being clear about it. Now we do get an answer in the form of Denise has transitioned. Denise is said with, like you said, she pronouns. And I like that the show clarified that.
Yeah, no, I think that in this case, we see Denise Bryson. She her, it would seem, as well as her overall figure has been fully transitioned. And for the most part, I think that the dialogue that she gives off shows that she's actually like a very, like, for one, competent that she has earned this overall position. She is willing to overall challenge Gordon Cole, and she is someone that is very overall passionate with her work. I think that overall this is what seems to be, from my overall perspective, a very positive sort of like representation of a transgender character inside of what I would say is a veritable vacuum in general media at the time.
Mm-hmm. No, I think she comes across as strong-willed. I will say I'm a little nervous of anyone who takes this much pride in being part of the American FBI.
Yep.
Just from like a political standpoint, I get a little nervous about that.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation.
She takes pride in it, which kind of makes me nervous.
She takes pride inside of her overall work, but is that a note on like her overall character, or is that a note that could be positive for her character? Even if, like, say for example, the Federal Bureau of Investigation does like horrible, seedy things inside of a narrative, if someone is passionate and believes that they are doing the right thing.
Right. We don't have enough information on that particular aspect of what she's proud about.
Yes.
We get more random names being thrown at us when Gordon Cole talks to Bill about Martha and about Paul. Mm-hmm. So Bill, of course, is fun because we have a Bill Hastings. We've got a Bill Shaker, and now we got a third Bill, or else that Bill is one of the other two Bills we already know. How many Bills do we have?
Enough. We have enough Bills to probably get ourselves a nice soda and a snack.
And then Dr. Hayward is Will, right? So he's also a Bill too, isn't he? by connection?
By connection, but at this point, I don't know if he's connected to anything. Forgive me, but I don't think he's going to be part of the picture.
Okay. So anyway, we get more random names. Sounds like you're not approaching those. You're not touching those with a 10-foot pole right now.
Not touching with a 10-foot pole now.
Okay, so you get this exchange between Denise and Gordon Cole, and we've highlighted a little bit of already, so I don't think we need to retread entirely on this ground. But during this conversation, Denise expresses some concern where it's like, hey, I know your profile, and I know that Tammy is barely 30, and as a woman, I have concerns. Which, can we just take her words just on her own? Do you have any problem with Denise saying that? Does Denise seem right?
I think that she seems right, but the fact that she has to clarify this to Gordon Cole, like, this should be already a point inside her
I'm
position.
just saying from Denise's side.
I know from Denise's side.
It sounds like a
agree.
valid concern as a thing to bring up. Also, it is her professional, I think, role to step in and call someone out if there's a potential issue where this person might not be appropriate with a fellow staff member.
I'm going to take every chance I can dunk on Gordon Cole that I can.
So now we get to the roasting of Gordon Cole. Gordon Cole, and sounds like you're going to agree with me here, is in the wrong in the sense that when he's confronted with a rather polite but direct claim and concern.
It's professional. It is pointed.
Denise has done nothing wrong.
She has done nothing wrong in this case.
Gordon Cole's response
is
to say, well, I'm a bit old school. And, Denise, when you were young, back when you were Dennis, just going to casually dead name you, back when you were Dennis, I didn't say anything, even though I had so much dirt on you, I could have buried you. I didn't do anything. And, when you transitioned from Dennis to Denise, I stood up for you. When those jokers over there were making fun of you, I told them to fix their hearts or die.
There is not enough gaslighting in Big Ed's gas farm that could be compared to what Gordon Cole is pushing.
And if you're listening and you're not sure what our criticism is, because I don't know how everyone feels about this exchange, there's something concerning when you're being brought up in a professional capacity, like, hey, just make sure you are bringing this female agent along for the right reasons. Don't abuse your power. Don't step out of line with her. I'm being serious with your history. And your response is to bring up all of the dirt you could have used against this person, who again is higher up than you. You could have done all this to them. How you stood up for them years ago when they transitioned, which is not related to the situation at hand. Mm-hmm. When you bring up all of these things to like emotionally blackmail the other person and hold it against them, that's not exactly a good thing to respond with.
No, it would be, as the professionals might call, a dick move.
Well, don't bring Dick Tremaine into this. I think he wouldn't do this. I think Dick Tremaine would handle this matter with more discretion.
Weirdly enough, Dick Tremaine has standards.
He really does. But I basically the situation boils down to Denise saying, hey, just make sure it's appropriate, okay? And Gordon Cole responding, I could bury you. And that's uncomfortable.
It is. It very much is. I also enjoy the fact that like it slid in towards the end, but whether or not you read it as a potential sort of like just trying to calm down the situation, but also sort of like try and make sure that you have insurances to back yourself up. Be like, yeah, you're bringing Rosenfeld with you, right?
Yeah.
He's like, good, I'm glad.
Right.
I trust you implicitly, Gordon, but you are bringing Rosenfeld with you, right?
Denise does say that she trusts Gordon Cole. She thinks he's onto something big. So if we believe her at her word, she does consider Gordon Cole a friend and colleague and genuinely trusts him.
Yep.
More than you do.
Oh, yeah.
That's for sure.
I've not had many instances where I can say I trust Gordon Cole because for the most part, I'm being shown that people are seeing him favorably, but all the information shows me a series of contradictions.
Yeah. And while I am withholding my opinions in the long term, we have agreed off pod that if there is like a glitch or weird visual effect that I think the professor might have missed, I will point it out to him.
Yes.
And I also will point out names in the credits for the most part.
Yes.
Just so that way he has all the available information that anyone watching the first time might have available.
Yes.
If like an actor repeats or something. So I will be doing that unless we decide not to for some reason. And with that in mind, there is a glitch effect going on with Denise after Gordon Cole leaves that I remember when I first watched this, back in 2017, it was really weird. Like I looked at this and I'm like, what just happened?
Well, mind you, when you say it's really weird, I say it's incredibly subtle. We had to like repeat the scene about 5 times for me to kind of get where you were coming from with it. But even then, I kind of had doubts onto my own memory to the sake of being like, is that something that was led to a conclusion with my mind and now my mind is purposely like superimposing that? Or is it something that I am genuinely overall seeing at this point?
Which is, for me, I've always seen it.
Exactly.
And I also went back and showed the professor the time when Phyllis was shot.
Yes.
And that one you were more quickly. We slow-moed it and the screen warbles. Like, you couldn't deny that.
The screen warbled. It contorts the overall hallway door. It looks very funky. None of that happens here for, like, the contortion, but there is this point where, like, Denise, she looks around her overall shoulder, she looks a bit forward, and then waves her overall hand. If you look very closely into this, it would seem, from what you and I have led to a conclusion on, again, still, there's a 1% doubt in the back of my head, where this footage seems reversed, if you will. It seems that it would have been a wave, if you will, before looking behind her shoulder.
It's the
because
motion.
There's an unfamiliar motion, especially when it comes to like the waving of the clothing.
I just think that it doesn't look right. Like immediately there's something off about the mannerisms and the speed at which certain actions are done.
Yes.
And just kind of like you watch the hand movements, there's just something odd about the way it lifts up.
Yes.
And this looks to be reversed. And again, the question I would ask you, why? Why do this?
Why would you do this? Well,
does that imply that Denise is in some way like Phyllis and was manufactured? Because it seems like Phyllis, based on Mr. C's response, he said that you imitate human behavior perfectly before shooting her. And then it seems like something weird happened where like her spirit left or something. Is Phyllis like Dougie? And is that also anywhere related to Denise? Why do this?
I think for the most part is to continue this overall unfamiliar sort of like weird feeling, if you will. I don't think it guarantees that Denise is wearing different skin, if you will, but I do think that there is something funky going on inside the FBI. I think that the action of like having this overall twisted movement going in reverse, whether it is like the Red Room looking on, because reverse movements are far more Red Room than Mauve Room at the moment. So keeping that in mind, in which like there's some sort of like overseers overlooking a government head, such as we've seen with Richard Nixon, with what like from the overall book material, I think that there is still like an errant influence, but I do think that Denise is real and true.
What do you mean by an errant influence?
An air end influence.
Oh, air and what do you mean by that?
It's something that's happening in the atmosphere, I'm recognizing, more than directly from the character. The character is just within that atmosphere.
So you don't think it has anything to do with necessarily Denise herself?
Not Denise herself, but I do think that there is a parallel that with this overall placement of
Phyllis,
power.
it seemed to do with Phyllis herself, if we go by the line that she imitates human behavior perfectly. Something seems odd about her.
Something seems odd about her, but I I don't have any parallels between Mauve or Red Room for Phyllis at this time. The warping of the overall space is the weirdest thing that happens, but for the most part, the jittering of the motion could lead into that
and you could say it's Mr. C causing it, but when he kills Daria, it doesn't do that. You know, it doesn't seem like any of his acts of violence other than this caused any distortion.
Sometimes he feels like to distort things, sometimes he doesn't. He likes to spice things up with his killing, you know?
Yeah, keep it fresh in the relationship with death. You mentioned before displeasure at episode 16 in season 2 when Albert doesn't act quite his character following Leland's death.
It seems like he's given someone else's script, if you will.
I think we even suggested Doc Hayward might have been a better pick for some of those lines.
Yes.
And when we're getting to the return, he does get a few moments with quips. He does get that when Mr. C had consumed poison, Albert says he must have eaten locally. When they look at the components of all the things that were in the trunk and all the miscellaneous objects, and he makes the joke that there's no cheese and crackers, he does get at least 2 like jokes that I wrote down.
He gets some pretty solid jokes. It may not be like in a frequency you'd expect with the screen time, but I still do think that it's an appropriate amount.
So my question is, does this feel like the Albert that you love?
Yes, asterisk.
Go on.
Yes, because there are various qualities that have Albert Rosenfeld. There's the flexibility with Albert Rosenfeld, but also the asterisk because of the weirdness that goes on in the following scenes. When it comes to the conversation with Mr. C, when it comes down to his involvement with Philip Jeffries, there are weird, warbly bits that I'm still feeling out.
So, do you like Al? Like, how are you feeling?
I like him, but it's also on a shaky foundation.
Of all the characters in the return so far, not any character we haven't seen, just the ones we have seen so far, who would you say you're the most enthusiastic to watch? Like, when they're on screen, you're the most interested, the most entertained?
Kyle MacLachlan.
So any of the ones?
Any of the Kyle MacLachlan versions, just because for the most part, that seems to be where the most antics go. I'm less focusing on just trying to bring back old memories, if you will, and more so what they're currently doing with the larger narrative with this very large catalyst of absolute chaos.
Who's your second place after Kyle MacLachlan's multiple characters?
Shirley's Laura Palmer.
Okay.
Because at this point, with her being grown, and what you could potentially do with a grown Laura Palmer and those sort of like visions that could come up, if you will, I do think that there can be a lot of fun playroom with the Laura Palmer that never was.
Okay. I'm satisfied with those answers. You've passed this round.
But do you feel that Mr. C passes the round of interrogation?
No.
From the
What's
FBI?
really interesting, because Mr. C seems so in command and so powerful in every situation before this, right? And before the car situation. And to see him here, if he is trying to be convincing, if he is trying to do his best Dale Cooper impersonation, he is doing such an awful job. Do not let him on Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Now, do we put this forward because he's vomited out his body weight in creamed corn, and that overall vile smell shows that there is something coming out, especially because he sounds differently through the electricity. Like there's a deep register, methodic register to it that could have been affected from that. Is it something where like Mr. C doesn't care and is more so very focused on just trying to send a message more to Philip Jeffries, because he does say that he's trying to make sure that Philip Jeffries, everything is safe? Or is it a C where there's something new happening with Mr. C that was also jogged in Dougie Coop, if you will? Like there was some form of like factory reset button or something that sort of like jumbled him.
Sure.
Which like he's not fully that same person we saw at the start of the return.
You tell me.
I'm going for B most of all, because Philip Jeffries is a person that if he has to send a code to another FBI agent, he's using forms of repetition that comes through. He apparently knows how a way to communicate to him that's important. But the fact that he looks directly at Albert, I know there's a history unlike what happened with Albert and Philip Jeffries, but the fact that this is being very plainly coded and making it seem eerie, I think that tone is more important than any facade Mr. C can put forward. It's almost as if there is a metaphorical gun to these agents' heads more than it is, oh yes, pretty please, tee-hee, I'm Cooper again. Like,
if I may position at least this much, I think that this scene is very, very effective emotionally
Yes.
and atmospherically. I think that regardless of whatever narrative reason there is for the vocals being lowered and more unnerving, I think it works, again, from the effect on the audience standpoint.
Yes.
That, at least for myself and for you, it sounds like, it was effective. There was this disconnect. When you have Mr. C giving the thumbs up, it clearly doesn't feel like Dale Cooper giving the thumbs up. And you can tell from Gordon Cole's reactions, he knows something's wrong. He's approaching very cautiously. Albert is spending almost the entire time trying to make eye contact and sweating, and then eventually failing and looking down. Tammy is there. Tammy is there. I don't know what she's doing, but she's there.
I love the fact that there is this very large emphasis on these episodes about a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Like, because Dale Cooper gave thumbs ups, and there was like a certain air about it, in just the physicality of just giving a nice thumbs up. But neither version of Cooper has given us that. And I didn't know that in a single action they would try to put so much emphasis on the uncanny valley feel you can put into a thumbs up.
Sure.
So I personally really do like that in all regards.
Then you have the vocal distortion that also happens, which I believe you caught, right?
Yes.
Where Mr. C, when he gives that thumbs up and gets it back, Mr. C says, "It's very, very good to see you, old friend."
Yeah, and the subtitles look really funky.
And the subtitles make it clear that it is YREV, very spelled backwards, before he says very frontways. Again, there's large associations with that.
Yes.
It is an audible distortion this time around.
Yes, which could lean into Mr. C with this overall reverse speech being more confirmed as that doppelkoop, if you will.
Well, and Gordon Cole seems to recognize the Arab thing, too, because when he talks to Albert later, he says, "I don't believe he greeted me properly, if you catch my meaning." That could be the thumbs up, but I also think it could be the backward speech that both of them noticed.
Yes.
It would be my working hypothesis, I guess. And it just seems like the whole entire time, Mr. C is like in a cage and is like, "Gordon, you will let me out, won't you? You will make sure that I am released, that I am exonerated, that in the court of law, I am not liable for these things. Gordon, when will you let me out?"
It's very much like Silence of the Lambs style of just like being behind the overall glass, and a threatening force is just, I wouldn't say calm, but reserved.
And I guess the line that most effectively I think works for me is very much toward the end, right before the shutters drop on the thumbs up. Love that visual. But you get this response from Mr. C because Gordon Cole had said they're going to work very hard to bring him home for their talk. And Mr. C responds, "I've never really left home, Gordon." And you get this idea, obviously, of the return home with Dale Cooper trying to return back to not only normal life, but possibly Twin Peaks as a town. And you've got the show kind of stuck in this return state to being the original show. And you've got Dougie returning home to his literal home with Janie E and Sonny Jim. The idea that Mr. C is the only one here is like, I don't need to go back. I'm already where I belong. When clearly he doesn't belong here. Clearly he's supposed to go back to the Red Room, but he doesn't see that as home.
Either doesn't see the Red Room as home, or if we are to take implications of Dougie Coop, the Red Room's everywhere. Like, the Red Room is literally, it appears out of nowhere, and there may be a portal that makes it a little bit easier to access, but it lingers. It lingers over, like, potential opportunities of great fortune. It lingers off into overall blankets that suddenly get coded into chevron patterns, similar to ones inside of the Palmer household. It is something that could be potentially everywhere. Where things get especially funky on, like, returning home is that Mr. C says that he was trying to get to Gordon Cole, but Agent TP says, hey, he was heading out west, which seems to be towards that Twin Peaks area. The potential lies that could overall weave. Him saying that he's deep undercover. I know that with the very sign, I said it in reverse. It might be like that sort of like doppelganger Coop.
Right.
But if he believes that he's undercover and he's trying to do something for his benefit, and if this is somehow connected to the Dougie Coop line, maybe he could see being this Dougie Coop as a form of being undercover, trying to find his way to get to Bob.
How convinced at this point are you of your theory, if I'm understanding you correctly, that you believe Dougie Coop will turn into Mr. C?
If I could give it a percentage, 10%.
Okay.
Like, it's something that's not in my ballpark entirely, but I would be lying if it was.
You brought it up a couple times.
I brought it up a couple times.
So there is a nagging 10% of you that thinks that the Dougie stuff happening in the past.
Yes.
And that it will transition into being Mr. C over time.
Yes.
Which is more in the present, if you want to think of it that way.
Yes.
Okay. 10%.
10%.
What does the rest of you think?
The rest of me thinks that these are two separate entities and they are going to meet for a potential final showdown off into the West End, or Mr. C's trying to sabotage as much as possible to stay around so that if he has to deal with Dougie Coop, or his goons can deal with Dougie Coop, that can be tended to.
Do you find any of these outcomes particularly more interesting than the others? Like, would you want or hope?
Not at this stage. At this moment, I think that it's going to be the build-up onto Dougie Coop. It's very much going to be on the shoulders of what happens next with Dougie Coop that will lean my overall entertainment value on whether or not turning more to a darker end and letting that Cooper be corrupted, or if it is something that is a very black and white, good versus evil moment that it seems to be right now.
So we have been talking for over 2.5 hours almost exclusively about things involving Cooper or Mr. C or Dougie.
Yes. This was a heavy Mr. C. Cooper episode.
This is we're not even done with it. So my question for you is, what do you think or feel about the fact that parts 3 and 4 are so heavy on this character that we have this much to say without hardly we haven't gone to Twin Peaks. We haven't been to the town of Twin Peaks. We haven't talked about any of that stuff so far.
Excited. Genuinely, I'm excited because yes, I could be maybe equally as excited if we did drop into Twin Peaks and see everybody and get to revisit every single living situation there.
We haven't visited any of them yet. We've spent over 2.5 hours just talking about one actor.
We poked it with our toe, like with Dr. Jacoby. But for the most part, if a show is willing to take its time away from that place, and maybe even, since Twin Peaks itself is a fictional place, give it a more general feeling or vibe, if you will, instead of like trying to dedicate it to this overall location, it is, at the end of the day, a bold choice, and I'm a fan of bold choices.
Okay.
So, if
I'll remember that next time we're driving somewhere, I will drive us off a cliff, and even as we're falling to our deaths, you will have to acknowledge it was a bold choice.
This is why, when we visited Snoqualmie, I was the driver. I will remain the driver.
Hey, I love Ronette's Bridge. Let's drive across it.
We can't even get there. It's like a stepway. It's like a hiking trail.
We will drive. Okay. So I am interested. I'm poking you a little bit just to see where your mind is at, I guess, and what you're looking for, because definitely the balance feels more skewed toward the Cooper, Mr. C, Dougie content.
Yes.
Obviously, Dougie wasn't even a thing in parts 1 and 2, but the amount of time that's spent with those characters has very much swallowed up a lot of the runtime in 3 and 4.
Yes.
So I was just curious on overall thoughts. Moving forward, do you want that to continue? Do you want it not to?
No wants per se. I don't need it.
Okay.
I don't need it. If they drop Dougie Coop and they drop everything with Mr. C and then start focusing onto Twin Peaks, if it starts focusing onto specifically New York, if it starts specifically focusing on Ontario, for whatever reason. I am intrigued on what is already offered on the table, so I want to see what happens next.
Okay.
And yeah, I could count that as a potential success for the show.
Okay. I will hold my tongue within my mouth. There it shall stay. I will not let my tongue fall upon the table. So before we leave this situation entirely, Gordon Cole insists to Warden Murphy that they give Mr. C his private phone call, but he wants to hear all about it, right? So record this private phone call.
So either A,
Or
he wants to
listen in.
hear all about it. It could be a joke along lines of he expects Cooper to call him. Or B, it could be that's our leading in, which like, I want the information here. I want everything that's going on. Track that phone call. Yeah. The first time I watched it, I was leaning on to A, but slowly as I kept rewatching it, I'm leaning more to B.
Okay. And they go outside, and there's this major blue filter over the conversation that ensues at first between Gordon Cole and Albert and Tammy, and then later Tammy is thrown out of the situation for a very, very bizarre series of dialogue, and the camera ogles her.
Yes, and it is something where like everything sort of like focuses there. We've been over the problems with that. But I want to focus on like the moment where like Gordon Cole's like turning down the overall volume, turning up the volume.
He's turning it
the volume,
up so that everything's way more sensitive.
We're way more sensitive so that they can get into lower registers when they're speaking to one another. But I do think that it's thanks to the blue filter, it is able to calm, if you will, the eyesight so that it doesn't anchor on anything, and it settles down as the focus now goes into something of audio. I think that the blue filter, though it may be seen as too much, if you will, that it seems that it's really trying to go into that theme, I think when focusing on a different sensory effect, such as audio, and using a very like calm color like that, I think that a cool color even, like it is in the coolest of spectrums of color.
Right, I know what you mean, yeah.
It is something that I feel aids the overall scene in general. I think it was an overall smart choice with the focus onto audio.
I'm not allowed to feel right now. I'll just say that, yeah, it was a pretty pronounced thing. You didn't notice it at first, though, I think you said, right?
I didn't notice it, but I think that's just because my overall focus was then calmed, if you will.
Okay.
When on review and looking onto it, I do see the blue filter much more emphasized because I was also looking for small details.
Now, do you want the
everything
same
else.
scene in the red filter so it completes the Jacoby effect, or...
Depends. Does it want me to feel aggressive? I think that the red flashing lights on just feeling nervous and aggressive, or like the overall flashing of the widest lights that's very intense from something with Fire Walk With Me, as opposed towards a consistent blue filter here. I think using color to evoke emotion is something that I would put into David Lynch's tool belt. I think that he's done it before. I think seeing it here now, I think it's been done effectively.
Do you read into it all that while they're having this conversation and the dial's all the way up and they're whispering back and forth, there are parts where they're not talking to each other and you can hear like a very, I don't know, like high humming sound, like it sounds like electrical hum, but like a humming sound in the background.
And I sound like this. I do think that that's just like there's a general...
Is that like the Black Lodge Red Room vibes that are being picked up by the audio?
I think it's something that or adjacent to that, mostly because Gordon Cole is trying to get information out of Albert and likely trying to get a truth out of it, and likely, who knows what sort of Philip Jeffries are lingering off in the distance.
Are they listening in?
Potentially. I think that Gordon Cole might even be listening in for that. I do think Gordon Cole knows more than he lets on.
Now, Gordon Cole does say, though, he has no clue what's happening. He does say, I don't understand this, and Albert agrees with him that he doesn't understand this.
I know he doesn't understand this specific situation, but I do genuinely believe Gordon Cole, or an aspect of Gordon Cole, knows a little bit more.
So you do believe him that he doesn't understand it?
I believe he doesn't understand this moment.
Okay.
I do believe also he has more information than anyone else, likely. I think the only person who would have more information than Gordon Cole would likely be Cooper because of what he's gone through. But I do think...
Maybe Jeffries, depending on what Jeffries even is right now.
For how much Gordon Cole has been following along with cases, for how much overall general intuition Gordon Cole has, and the infamous Gordon Cole Blue Rose cases. I wonder how much burdens Jeffries ends up carrying and what we can do with those overall burdens with when Jeffries is in the field. Because inside of Fire Walk With Me, we literally saw one of the three people in the room when Jeffries does arrive is Cooper, Gordon Cole, and Albert Rosenfeld.
Mm-hmm.
How much he may have done personal investigation or how much he even let go. There's enough absent air of Albert Rosenfeld's response that Mr. C staring at him makes him increasingly suspicious. This is where, like, the asterisk on the yes that I mentioned beforehand begins blinking a bright red.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what do you think Albert's going to be going to find next? Because Gordon Cole, alludes that there's someone else that needs to take a look at Cooper, and Albert says, I'm right there with you, and Gordon Cole's like, do you know where she lives, where she is? And he's like, I know where she drinks.
It's gotta be Annie.
Okay.
It's genuinely gotta be Annie. I can't think of anyone else it could be, because it's someone who is deeply attached to overall Cooper. And unless they really want to pull an Audrey here, I do think that the person that would be driven to drink over the loss of Cooper would probably be the person who was closest to Cooper by the very end. Someone who might overall not know what to do and lives in the overall town where Norma could potentially be around as support. But still, what do you do when you are literally shunted through time and space only to be brought back to know that your overall efforts had failed on someone that you mythically loved? I say mythically loved because I still think that the romance was rushed.
And we've speculated before, I think, that given the incentive the Lodge or Law Jez would have to pull Cooper in. Wyndham Earl was likely a puppet on a string, a lure to bring in Dale Cooper.
Yes.
Annie herself might have been a lure. How many of her feelings of, toward Dale Cooper were even her own? Were they planted? Were they influenced? Were they magnified by any sort of spirits or entities?
And where was Miss Twin Peaks hosted at, by the way? I'm trying to remember, did we get a venue for Miss Twin Peaks?
I don't remember 100%. I guess in my mind, I just assumed it was the Roadhouse, but I don't recall.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's the Roadhouse. It's at the very least a location where you can get alcoholic drinks at.
Right. So you're thinking that maybe in the next couple episodes, we might see Annie there drinking at the Roadhouse.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll obviously see what happens in that regard. Back in the town of Twin Peaks, we're at the sheriff's department. Outside of the Jacoby thing and the Roadhouse at the end, that's all we see, I think, is the sheriff's department in these whole 2 hours, right?
There's no other location for Twin Peaks other than the Roadhouse and the sheriff's station and the Jacoby
did you expect going into the return that you would have 2 hour stretches where you spend very little time in the town of Twin Peaks?
I put very little expectation going forward, but I will still say it's a overall nice surprise. Just because for the sheriff's station, for these overall like iconic moments, for these overall places we're revisiting, there is a lifelessness to a lot of it.
Yes. The lack of music is a big part of it. But yeah, it does feel a bit different, per se. And we're not seeing the whole town. We're just seeing this part right now. We open up on a scene where there's tons of files and paperwork on the table. It's a follow-up, presumably, from what we were seeing in the last 2 parts, where Hawk received that message from Margaret Lanterman to investigate something to do with his heritage. Something's missing involving Dale Cooper. And they're looking through all these files, not able to find what's missing.
Yeah, they can't find what's missing. And they keep thinking...
And Hawk even points out, how are you supposed to find it if it's missing? And they just kind of sit there. And they just kind of sit there. And they just kind of sit there.
They just kind of sit there. I love the fact that, like, there are points where, like, Andy tries to overall speak up. For one, Hawk stops him and says, let me speak out loud. Yeah. But also, Andy's making it clear, like, all this stuff is here.
Yes.
And there's
incredibly useful.
There's a point where Lucy is like trying to help out. Is like he's trying to speak clearly, like it has to be here, it has to be with my heritage. And Lucy just panics, like, ha! The bunny! The chocolate bunny! Now, Hawk, I had a chocolate bunny because there was a point, and I don't like talking about this around Andy, but there was a bubble inside me of gas.
25 years ago, she ate a chocolate bunny, and this is the thing she's freaking out about.
And I had it, and I read about it, and like it's like your people would use like things such as chocolate to overall up his gas. Is that correct? Is that correct?
Well, even before this, when he mentions as to this heritage, she just looks at him and says, Hawk, you're an Indian. And he just looks at her, and he doesn't have to say anything, because we're all feeling it as the audience, right? Of just like, God, this man is not paid enough. Hawk is not paid enough to deal with these people.
Paid. It is not enough.
And I don't know, like, you've commented some negative things about Andy in the past especially. But like, when you think about the past original show, and we all acknowledge that Hawk was the hardest worker. He did all the stuff in the town for the law enforcement. I never had this overwhelming feeling of like sympathy for Hawk and feeling like he is not paid enough. I never had it this way in the original show.
No.
Because Andy could be a softie and would cry and stuff. I never got this sense of incredible incompetence from him or Lucy to this extent. They feel so inept. And you can argue, and I understand, people as they age, some faculties can slow. They have difficulty adjusting to things. But I look at what we're dealing with here, and I'm like, Hawk, you need to get help from different people. Like, these are not the 2 people you assigned this job to.
Now, mind you, before this sort of case, like back in the original series, I don't think that there's really any instant Hawk needs help on anything. Hawk seems to be on top of everything. Hawk seems to be the main person helping other individuals.
Yeah.
Hawk seems to be the one in charge. So when there's a point where Hawk needs some help, and then we put into scope a few individuals that he has been close to over the course of like many years, as opposed towards some of the overall new staff members, and he brings them into this overall table.
Get Cappy on the line.
Who knows if Cappy's still working there?
Please find him.
this is not necessarily good company, and maybe it's just like playing with that overall familiar company more than anything.
Maybe this is a job for the Bookhouse Boys. Maybe give it to them instead of these two.
I think at the end of the day, I think this whole entire series of scenes is supposed to be played off not as haha humor, but as a presence of the humor of speculation whenever it comes to like the fixation of small materials, because similar to how one can analyze things Sam Stanley style, this is a case in which like, is it about the bunnies? No, it's not about the bunnies. I can say that confidently about the bunnies, but is it about the bunnies? Like it's that sort of like juggling sensation that maybe this is a way for them to play off the ideas that you will be caught inside these details. Some details are best to sort of like leave off to the side. Some things to be left curious on. You may never know.
Did you like the scene? The bunny scene?
I like it on paper.
Do you like it in execution?
In the weird flippant yes and no matter.
Okay.
Yes, in the respects that I do think that it's overly silly. I think I love Michael Horse's overall like deliveries of it. It's like, no, it's not about the bunny. And there is a funness to that. But it is a scene that goes on.
Yeah.
And on. And on. And then you look at the runtime, it's like, oh, we're still going. Okay. And on. And on.
I also want to point out Hawk brought in donuts from the Double R.
Which it says Double R to go.
Yeah. They normally don't get their donuts from the Double R in the original show.
Mm-hmm.
They got them from that other donut place in town.
There's also a little like holder for coffee. So not only does it sort of deliver the idea that they are able to streamline things from the Double R between the donuts as well as the coffee, but also the Double R has grown because it's Double R to go. Like that was a new sort of like imprinting showing that like time has passed. That's very nice. I will also mention on the note of donuts, there's this little sign that Hawk puts up that says "Donut Disturb."
Well, it just says "disturb" and it has a donut.
Yeah, that would confuse me because it did confuse me at first because it looked like disturb. Why would you want someone to disturb? Oh, that's a donut. It's a pun. I would be the foolish cop that enters in the middle of the worst possible situation.
Because there's a sign that says "disturb."
It says disturb.
It invites you in.
It invites me in. It wants me to come in.
So we learn more kind of passively through observation on one of the other law enforcement officers that is working there, who I understand why Hawk didn't bring him on the case, and that'd be Chad. We learn about Chad, who just kind of likes to exist around people and make snide remarks. He will not let other people answer questions. He will jump in instead of letting them answer questions. He has a terrible snarky attitude. He reminds me more of a Deer Meadow like deputy than anyone in Twin Peaks.
He does remind me of Deerwood Meadow. It might just show an overall
Deer
gap.
Meadow. It's Deer Meadow.
One day. It might show a gap between like the generations of police in which like what they are willing to overall accept, and they are channeling that through specifically Chad, just because we are seeing more police and law enforcement actively working here.
Yeah.
That's one thing to note. It could be a sensation of making sure that there is a skeptic around to sort of like play off the ideas of the overall Strange, to sort of like put up a little bit of dialogue. It might just be that Chad's going to become important soon enough, and having that Albert Rosenfeld-esque Chad available with less of the charm. It's just important to establish him now. In any case, Chad's a dick and will actively mock Margaret Lannerman.
Yeah, they talk about her talking to her log, and he mentions like consulting his pine cone.
Consulting his pine cone, how
like
she speaks to overall Pinocchio. Yeah,
That's an Albert line. I mean, do you like it in this character? Because you liked Albert.
I did like Albert. It's just that these are his only lines.
Okay.
His only lines exist in that end of Spite.
And again, that's where the charm is lost for you.
The charm is lost because there's no sort of like officiality. There's no sense of him being on the job. It seems he walked into a room to say, ha, ha.
And yeah, he just kind of is there a lot of times. He just kind of lingers.
He just is like lingering inside the room. He's an omnipresent point. Maybe he's one of the Red Room existing in the background.
Maybe someone manufactured Chad for a purpose. And then the other law enforcement agent we need to talk about is Sheriff Truman.
Yeah, Sheriff Truman. Ain't this interesting, Kalil? Sheriff Truman. A very notable name and presence inside of here.
Played by Robert Forster, who was the original pick from the original Twin Peaks to be Harry Truman. However, unfortunately, they were not able to get him due to contractual situations. Michael Onkean got the role. So in a strange twist of poetic fate, Robert Forster is available for 2017 to be Sheriff Truman now.
I already know the question you're going to probably put forward when it comes down to this. How this actor who was once supposed to play Truman is now in that slot of Truman, and how we don't have the initial Truman inside of this same space, and how I might compare this overall Truman to the other Truman.
No, I wasn't going to ask that. Since you've asked it, go ahead and answer.
I'm not going to push anything against this man that I wouldn't push against, like, if the original Truman actor was here and present and acting.
Yeah,
mostly
if Michael
because
Onkean was the one giving the performance, yeah.
Yes, mostly because I think that the most highlight moments that come off from Michael Onkean's Sheriff Truman come off of him bouncing off someone such as Cooper.
Yep, or Albert.
Or Albert, or even Josie. There
Yes.
are like points in which he's able to move with the overall moods of other characters. For the most part, a lot of the points this actor is met with is either A, just direct information with another person, or B, is something where he's kind of like putting up a wall against him overall self that he's not willing to open up. And I also say that that's just part of the dialogue, if you will.
He feels distanced. And again, that might be the dialogue more than the performer.
I do see that this Sheriff Truman has more of a vocal range than I've seen from Michael Onkean, but I do think that that directness from Michael's performance was kind of also a bit of the charm of the overall character. So it's good that overall I can separate them. I also am kind of humored by the fact that literally on the deathbed, they have the original Sheriff Truman. Meanwhile, stepping in is what seems to be his brother. Potentially, like judging if we're doing any information from
we get a name.
History. We do get a name, do we?
Yeah, I believe it's said. It's also in the credits.
Which would be?
Frank.
Yep, that would be the brother name.
Yep, Frank Truman is here.
So that correlates
To the character who suddenly was inserted into Secret History.
Yes.
Almost like they were writing him in the book. So a year later or so when the show comes out, it would be like a natural thing. Like, it's his brother back. Totally always was there.
I don't know about natural, but it most certainly is something that does two things for me. One, makes me shout even louder, Hawk should have been sheriff. Because literally
Thank
some in
you.
Heredity...
I have to hold my tongue so much, but you don't know how much I agree with you.
Like...
Okay, I'm not going to get into the whole thing with Michael Onkean right now.
Thank you.
But I remember when I was watching the show the first time, I was really sad not to see Harry Truman, Michael Onkean. I was sad to miss that character.
Yes.
When I saw it was a different actor, and it was a new Truman character, my first thought, I don't even know if I remembered him from the book. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But my first thought, I remember early on, after realizing it's not Harry Truman, why isn't Hawk the sheriff? Why did you give it to his new character brother?
If I can guess, and it's kind of a gross thing if you put it into the terms of law, in which he has a brother he's close to. He knows that by the terms of their overall relationship throughout the many decades that they exist to each other, he's like, I can only trust you with this position. I know that you can handle it. You should go ahead. Like, that's sort of like heredity. It should have been Hawk. Like,
decades of law enforcement experience aren't enough. Like, I
think that he could, like, you could put forward a brotherly relationship with Hawk and Truman. I do think that exists between the two of them.
Well, and then you have the hereditary angle, too, where the book especially emphasizes the idea of generations. Because they retconned Harry Truman's father to being law enforcement instead of being a different career. They retconned that, I think it was either father or grandfather. So now it's generations of Trumans in law enforcement. So of course the brother's going to do it, because that's what the Truman family does.
I don't like the Truman family's choices. I genuinely feel that if you are spending so much time inside of this one place, and you have shown that you have been doing some amazing stuff with your work, that Hawk has not shown anything otherwise.
My notes, this section's called Hawk Should Be Sheriff, and then I have bullet points under that. But no, I think Hawk should have been sheriff, and I will stand by that, and they will write that on my tombstone. Okay, that's what they're going to write.
That is very specific, I love it.
Also, we do get along, because there's not really much to say about Sheriff Truman, right? Like, there's not much to say about Frank. He is Frank, and he is true, and he's a guy, and he responds to things.
I think that still is a fun bit of personalization. I do think that, again, there's not much that is being done with the character. I think they could hypothetically do more with the character, but as far as an introduction goes, it's a weak introduction, but still a fun character that I'm excited to see more of.
Frank Truman is also informed when he's talking to law enforcement there that a boy at the high school named Dennis Craig had OD'd, and there's a little bit of talk about that, and this seems to imply the idea that, yeah, drugs are still a problem in Twin Peaks, especially with the youth.
Yeah, Danny Craig, initials DC, just going to put that out there, potentially.
Like for Washington?
For Washington, Dale Cooper. It's the usage of DC that could be used as a potential association. But regardless, someone who has OD'd inside of the overall area, it seems drugs are still an issue despite the lack of Leo Johnsons available.
There's still Renaults, don't worry.
There's still at least one Renault.
Where there's one?
Where there's
one? Many.
There could be. We might.
Infinite.
Like, we don't know how many Renaults died between, when we first saw them last. They may have gone through 20 during this time.
Yeah.
So we might be at the final Renault.
And we also get this as an opportunity then to interact with our law enforcement agent, Bobby.
So I was incorrect
Bobby
last
Briggs.
episode. I was incorrect that was not Bobby sitting at the Roadhouse.
I literally told you his name in the credits is Red and played by a different actor.
I seem to have been incorrect.
You were incorrect last time already. You weren't.
It seems that I continued to be incorrect this episode.
Did you actually think it was Bobby?
I had suspicions.
I thought you were just saying he was like Bobby.
I thought it was very like Bobby. There were suspicions that it was a form of Bobby or something Bobby adjacent. But no, now I can rest easy to know where Bobby ended up. Because that was a curiosity.
So what do you think of him being a cop?
I think that it is the best possible ending towards Bobby. Once being someone who was against the law, now doing something for the law. It could be something that could be calming for his soul for the amount of murders that could be underneath him. It could be something that he is able to follow in his father's footsteps, but not in too far of an official capacity that he's absolutely absent from everything else. I think that he's able to give back in a way that could be emotionally fulfilling. So I think that this is a better end for Bobby as far as what's being communicated at this time.
And so far, it seems like the implications in Portrayal are positive because, of course, police and cops and media can be portrayed in multiple different ways, whereas someone like Chad seems to be the bad end of a cop. It seems like Bobby is upstanding.
Bobby's upstanding, and what's very notable about this is that Bobby is keeping an eye on drug trafficking, especially when it comes to these overall, what is described inside of it, correct me if I'm wrong, designer Chinese drugs that if
could
it were
be coming in from Canada.
Could be coming from Canada. Bobby disputes it and says, I have an eye on every single trail. I have an eye of where they could come from. If it couldn't be coming from Canada, I would know. And his experience with Leo could feed into that.
Right, and his experience with Laura, his experiences as himself as a youth who I would decide is at risk.
You couldn't have someone better in this position.
Not likely, no. And then Bobby comes into the room where all the files and portfolios of the Laura Palmer, Dale Cooper information is all on the table. And right away, he sees that photo of Laura Palmer. Laura Palmer's theme kicks in, soars up, and he starts weeping as the music rises, saying, man, brings back some memories.
I love this scene, mostly because the framing is different from every other point inside the entire return. There's nothing that looks like this frame in any other point, mostly because it centers on Bobby. There's almost like a little bit of a golden tinge that comes in through the natural lighting, and he's focused on, and he breaks down very expressively. I wouldn't say, I still prefer, when Bray Wise breaks down, but I would say in the same capacity of, a large emotional breakdown, sees the overall image, and the music starts wafting through the air. It's almost as if you took a picture from the soap opera catalog, cut it out, and placed it down here, because this seems like something you'd see in something like Days of Our Lives or anything I'd walk into for overall soap operas, because my family was a big fan of those.
Now I just like to believe that it's the effect of Laura Palmer directly, and if you bring in other people connected to Laura Palmer's life, they will also have a soap opera reenactment with the Laura Palmer theme, and they will start breaking down. I want them to next start bringing in Dr. Jacoby with his shovel. He could bring his shovel into the office. He sees the photo of Laura Palmer. Man, brings back some memories. And then you see tears fall below the red and blue glasses. Then they bring in James.
Amongst the gold shovel.
James wanders in confusedly. And then he's like, wow, brings back some memories. And he starts crying. And you just end up with every single resident of Twin Peaks.
Everyone's lined up outside.
So my question is, Bobby got this moment. how important do you think it is that Bobby was the one who got this moment compared to other people who were influenced by Laura Palmer? Did it have to be Bobby?
I would say, for the case of adding more empathy to Bobby, for the fact that he is in this position, but also new viewers, if you will, to see someone emotionally break down over someone familiar. He's one of the more emotive individuals left inside Twin Peaks. So if anything else is done with Bobby from this point on that might go against Bobby, it might frame him, if you will, from an audience perspective on someone that you hope the best for.
He is clearly the most emotive character so far in the town.
Yes.
If you don't count Lucy's fear of phones as an emotion.
Or
Andy looking endearingly, lovingly over his son Wally.
Or James looking lost.
James is the emotion of lost, yeah. So, again, so you think Bobby was a good fit for this, for what it does for Bobby's character. So let's, again, move forward. Do you think that characters like James, or should Donna appear, Donna or Jacoby, do you think they should get a moment where they reflect upon Laura, they have the sad music? Do you think they should have a moment the same way?
It depends on the overall pacing, because if it's, like I mentioned before, if something of shock value happens again and again and again and again, it loses its momentum. The same thing can be said, unless you do it in new creative ways, with such things as overly emotive.
Donna walks over to the cemetery. She sees Laura Palmer's tombstone. The music starts kicking in. She starts crying. They really couldn't bury you deep enough.
At that point, it becomes less of a fixture for someone to overall also connect, emote, or overall play off of, and more so of a bingo card to sort of like check off as you continue to move forward and be like, okay, clearly this is important. Who's next? Come on, bring them in.
So you are satisfied with the scene very
I'm
much,
satisfied with the scene, skeptical and curious if they try to repeat it.
Yeah, because it's the most, like you said, most soap opera this show has gotten so far.
And I can see a possibility where that does happen. Yeah. Genuinely. I can see where like they try to reopen this window again and again and show the overall cracks that people still exist in this Twin Peaks. But it's going to have a varied of reactions depending on how it continues it.
Interesting. Bobby also mentions that Dale Cooper, when that name is brought up, that Dale Cooper was the last man his father ever saw alive before Listening Post Alpha burned down.
And then you have to think to yourself, was it Cooper? Was it Mr. C? Was it Dougie Coop? Where are we going?
Based on the ending of The Secret History of Twin Peaks and the Mayday distress call, I think some answers seem more likely than other answers.
Some answers are more likely. But how far did they take those answers?
Well, and if this was also many years ago in the past, that also adds the time element for you.
Not to mention the differences between the reality that we've seen versus the reality change to say that this could lead to different results, such as we've seen with Benjamin Horne. Mm-hmm. So, where are we here? I'm leaning to Mr. C. 10% gonna put that over there for a Dougie Coop.
Okay. Is somehow future past some oddity?
Future past some oddity, contradictions inside of the book.
Okay. So again, considering we talked about so many of the contradictions within The Secret History of Twin Peaks as a book, do you have any indications that the return is happening in any different timeline from the original Twin Peaks show?
No.
Or Fire Walk with Me, for that matter.
No, I think that it does do a nice through line as well as plays with potential alternate realities with Benjamin Horne. But how far that might stretch beyond...
So Secret History just seems like the anomaly right now.
The Secret History does remain as an anomaly in many cases between the return as well as the main show. But the main show and the return seem to be the most interconnected.
That's what I'm just checking, is if you think The Secret History of Twin Peaks is the same timeline as the return.
In some ways, in different ways, yes. It is the anomaly. It is something in which, like, the shaky foundation of what is true, what is not true, is being waved about.
Okay.
Sheriff Truman, he is brought outside, if you will.
Yeah.
To Lucy and Andy, and between them, Michael Cera, who is their child.
And you do know Michael Cera because you, I know, are a fan of the Scott Pilgrim movie.
Yes. Michael Cera has a very recognizable register, has a very recognizable face. He's someone that, if you put him onto a potato chip, someone could sell that on eBay for about $2,000 because this potato chip looks like Michael Cera. Very recognizable.
It better
individual.
be it better be sriracha flavor. It could be like Michael Sriracha.
That's gonna get you another extra $1,000.
Good. Mr. Jackpots.
But Wally Brando. Fun name. Don't know where the Brando part comes from.
Marlon.
Is the Brando part a middle name or a
Marlon Brando.
Yeah, I know who Marlon Brando is. Forgive me, usually children have the last name
No,
of their
Sonny
family.
Jim, Wally Brando. It's the same thing. He's just called Wally Brando.
It's just that's entirely the first name. Then why isn't like Wally Brando imposed on his overall like righteous?
It's either a middle name or it's a nickname, or perhaps he's had his name changed to Brando.
Beautiful.
It could be any number of those things.
It could be any number of those things. Just sitting outside, I believe, on his motorcycle as he's like talking toward Sheriff Truman in a very like, I would almost say like a spiritual, a very sort of like going with the flow of the conversation, just trying to tell Truman that he appreciates him, that he's coming to see overall Truman on his deathbed because he has his grandfather, or godfather, sorry. And he's just trying to tell him that I appreciate you in the most wave your hands in the air way. To the point he literally waves his hands in the air
all
at one
you
point in
needed
the conversation.
So like if we're going with just like a utility standpoint, like what is happening in the scene, you could rewrite the scene where Frank goes outside, Wally says, "Hello, I heard your brother was sick. He's my godfather. I hope he does well, and I wish the same for you." And then Frank says, "Thank you." Cut. That's the end of the scene. That is all the information you need to communicate. Maybe you can add in a little bit where Wally also turns and says, "By the way, mother, father, you can do what you want with my bedroom." And that's it. That's all the information. But it is stretched over this very long period, or at least what feels like a long period of time, milking it for humor and awkwardness.
With a tone that goes around this register and is trying to evoke something even greater. And this is the speed we're going to go at for the next few minutes.
Now, I do think that there is a lot of humor to be had here.
I think this is one of the more successful points of humor.
What I never can tell is how much of the humor is because I know it's Michael Cera and this is a glorified cameo, and how much I just actually find the writing or the situation funny if it was a different actor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to separate those things.
I think that this is one of the more successful acting points for Sheriff Frank Truman in the respects that he's just sort of like receiving the information, just sort of like nodding. Okay, well, in that case, I hope that the roads end up meeting with your wheels.
Yeah.
Just like something will ground you, child. It's like, that's great sentiment. Brando just
turn of phrase.
Turn of phrase. And you could tell like this guy just really does not want to be there till eventually when the end comes to the conversation where it's like, my dharma is the road and your dharma is just like gestures.
He doesn't even say is. He just says your dharma.
Your dharma. And
then he just gestures vaguely toward the police department.
Just like Truman nods and just like no more talking, just turns around, just goes back.
I think that's a very funny type of humor.
I think that was a successful scene for both these characters.
Who wrote that, do you think? Was that David Lynch? Was it Mark Frost? Or did Michael Cera write that?
I think Wally Brando, not Michael Cera, Wally Brando.
I legitimately, my headcanon would be Michael Cera had a large opinion in that writing. That doesn't feel like any of the other comedy bits we've seen from Lynch or Frost.
It doesn't seem like that, but it also Lynch has had a history of just letting a actor overall go with the feeling and flow of something. Like
well, it's
having
the awkwardness of doing the my dharma, your dharma, and then just gesturing. Mm-hmm. It's that bit. That's what makes me think this is a more like, I don't know, very specific type of like millennial humor. This feels more in line with like our generation as people who are in their like 20s or going into early 30s.
Yes.
That's the humor that I think this scene hits in a way that I've never gotten out of the Frost and Lynch stuff before. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I have my suspicions that Michael Cera tweaked that dialogue a little bit. But I think, Lynch or whoever else went with it, so there's fairness there. There is something maybe to mine out of the kind of longer segment of Michael Cera, Wally Brando's speech. Mm-hmm. He says, "I've crisscrossed this great land of ours countless times. I hold the map of it here in my heart, next to the joyful memories of the carefree days I spent as a young boy here in your beautiful town of Twin Peaks. From Alexandria, Virginia to Stockton, California, I think about Lewis and his friend Clark, the first Caucasians to see this part of the world. Their footsteps have been the highways and byways of my days on the road. My shadow is always here with me, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right. Except on cloudy days. Or at night. And then Hank's reply is, yes, well, Wally, it's great to see you again. There is something to be mining out of Lewis and Clark and Shadows.
Yeah, Lewis and Clark and Shadows, I think that it's trying to introduce those elements, those who did not have the secret history, who could not get their hands on the secret history. I think mining those little bits out to not only reward the readers, but also bring up the possibility to other viewers.
So what does it do? Like, what do you think bringing those things up in this segment does? Like, yes, you name-dropped Lewis and Clark. What about them?
I think, at this point, it's mostly a name drop and association with Shadows, association with people that are wandering and looking for something. I think that at the end of the day, again, it's something to reward readers as well as potentially take on new leads, but I don't think that there's anything complete here without any other outside substantive material. I think that for the most part, it is that reward.
Okay. A couple more things I want to highlight before we move on entirely is that before they even get a chance to talk to Wally Brando, there was an officer who had to tell Frank Truman about this. And shout out to him, shout out to the direction or the actor, or whatever was involved here, because this random officer, don't even know the name of him, I don't know who he is, he just shows up at the door so dramatically, like leans half in, and then just out, when there's a moment of pause, there's a man out front, says his name is Wally Brando. And then he turns and looks even more dramatically. He said he wants to pay his respects to you, Sheriff Truman.
I will also add that he doesn't lean on anything. He leans on air.
He leans on air. It is such an awkward, overly dramatic way of communicating information. Do not know this man's lifestyle choices.
He's probably the spinning locker man.
He
the
could
mysterious spinning locker man. He has the gestures. He has the moves. Have we found the missing link?
The missing link. Maybe. Also wanted to mention, we do get a little bit of Buckhorn police commentary. Just nothing happens with it.
No, there's one thing. It's not nothing. There's one thing, and it's actually very, very important, especially for my continued conspiracies.
And that is the appearance of Sabrina Sutherland, the Twin Peaks and David Lynch producer, who is appearing and credited as floor attendant Jackie. You're excited to see Sabrina Sutherland in her proper role in the Buckhorn Police Department.
Are you proud of yourself?
No, I'm proud of Sabrina Sutherland.
Are you proud of yourself? I went to the bathroom, and did you look that up while I went to the bathroom between those cuts?
No, I already had it in my notes.
You already had it in your notes.
Yes,
Good.
because I'm prepared.
You're prepared. Good.
And I'm not proud of myself. I'm proud of Sabrina Sutherland.
Well, be prepared for this overall hot take that I'm putting forward. So it's probably not even that much of a hot take, but I do feel fairly confident into it.
Okay, I'm dipping my toes in the water.
Dip your toes in that water. So this also could go deeper into how much police were involved with it, but one key detail that's added to the Buckhorn police is that they keep looking into the mysterious body, but because there was the separate head of the woman and the overall unidentified body, they can't identify the body because there's a government interference. There's a government
military clearance.
Mm-hmm. And by that military clearance, I'm thinking to myself as far as individuals that would be involved with the government and or military by extension, there is someone who is obese, who is part of the military, who is now currently absent. As far as a body can be concerned, I'm thinking that the body itself, if it's worried about military clearance, is Major Briggs' body.
Okay.
For a few reasons. For one, if there was any details covered up or any oversights or any sort of point that the police station could not get to that could cause Hawk's reaction, if the government had to step in and go deeper into that and then the police were brushed aside because of the mysterious facts of that, that's one thing. Number two is the build. I've already kind of went over that. But number three, this body is without a head. Mm-hmm. Earlier on between these two parts, we see Major Briggs' head alone floating through the cosmos. That's where the head is. That's where the body is. Well, isn't that a really funky thing?
Last episode, did you say that you didn't think the body would matter or you didn't care if it mattered?
I don't think it's either I didn't care or I can't remember myself. I can see myself going with both.
You commented that you didn't think it was going to be much, and I can't remember if you also said you didn't really care who it was.
Yeah.
Because now you're getting to a potentiality. Would you care if it is?
I'm getting to a point where it's giving me interest to care. It's putting a bit of bait on a hook, and I'm a fish, and I'm starting to nibble on that
Do you think
worm.
it'd be more interesting if it is Major Briggs, or more interesting if it's someone you haven't met?
If it's something where Major Briggs, by the reputation of the story being that he burnt down, and somehow his body was found here, I think that adds a bit of interest, especially if Mr. C was the last one to see him, and then that antic happened, and then was a body recovered? Was anything done with the body?
Sure.
If the head is somehow off into space, if you will, how did that go about? There's a series of events that could potentially unfold in fun and fascinating ways that I am game for, that I'm curious on, that wherever the return may guide me, those are where my suspicions lie.
Fair enough.
It's one small thing, it's one small detail, but taking on some other pieces, a picture may start to form.
The last thing I wanted to highlight before we get to the Roadhouse and the Bang Bang Bar is that we get 2 dedications in Part 3. There are no dedications in Part 4. Part 3 has dedications for Don S. Davis, who is the actor for Major Garland Briggs, and for Miguel Ferrer, who is the actor for Albert Rosenfeld.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, from our dialogue off pod, Miguel Ferreira was someone who died post-production.
Yeah, he was able to shoot the scenes with the show, but he passed away before the show came out.
And Garland Briggs died years beforehand.
Yes.
Which makes me curious on the general casting as well as the appearance of Major Briggs' head, or the interpretation of Major Briggs' head that speaks out.
Right. And of course, Jeffries is a big question mark too, because David Bowie passed away before he could be involved in the project.
Yes.
Will we get a dedication for him? What would be replacing him if they have a character replacing him?
Yes.
Will we even hear Jeffries outside of the person who's maybe not Jeffries on the message to Mr. C? A lot of unknowns there. But it does make sense to me that Donis Davis and Miguel Ferrer would have their dedications here, considering that we are getting more of their characters in these 2 episodes. So with the Roadhouse and Bang Bang Bar, we get 2 songs, 1 for each episode going with the credits. I wanted to throw up, before we get started here, the thought and question to you of what these songs are doing. We previously dissected the songs of the Shadow Song by the Chromatics.
Yeah.
To see if there was any parallels, and we were able to mine some interpretations out. We'll try the same here with these 2. But one thing that kind of came to my mind as I was writing these lyrics down and typing them, we know that David Lynch didn't write these songs, but he did potentially pick them. We don't know. He might have picked them. He might have picked the artist. Assuming he did pick the songs, is this the new version of the Log Lady intros? In the sense that it is something not at the beginning, but at the end, that provides some form of commentary and reflection from a semi-outside force that he can control.
If it's not like it at least rhymes.
Right? Like, it does seem like a poetic rhyming, if you want to go with that idea, or mirroring, if David Lynch is the one picking these songs.
Or reversing of speech, if you will.
Yes, if we even think that these all relate. So I'm going to do the same thing as last time. First, we got Mississippi by the Cactus Blossoms.
I'm sorry, it's Mississippi.
No, it isn't. So I'll get to why in a second. So the first part, I'm going down to the sea. Mississippi. I watch the sun yellow and brown, sinking suns in every town. So the I is still there at the end of Mississippi. It just leads into the next line. It's what's called poetry. It's what's called art.
I think it's called suspicion. I'm pretty sure that you're just trying to underrepresent the great nation of Mississippi.
So I'm going down to the sea, Mississippi, missing an I, watch the yellow sun and brown, sinking suns in every town.
For the most part, it seems to be a very nostalgic song, if you will. It seems to be something that you're looking back onto something off into the distance, if you will. And this is also an episode where looking back off into the distance and also having that sort of like longing to be back could be argued, especially when it comes to Overall Cooper, who is practically lost looking off into the distance, only seeing vague, similar things as he's trying to find his way overall back.
Okay. My angel sings down to me. She's somewhere on the shore waiting for me, with her wet hair and sandy gown, singing songs, waves of sound.
Well, we've seen angels off into the distance. We haven't seen a return to angels since something such as Fire Walk With Me. But to say that there is something calling out to you, if you will, like there's been like a few different luring instances.
I mean, Laura Palmer literally washes up on a shore.
Yeah.
But would you call the wrapped in plastic her sandy gown?
Yeah, it's a gown that's filled with sand.
Okay.
Like,
yeah, well, that's fine.
It fits.
Singing songs of sound. I mean, where I'm from, the birds sing a pretty song. You can do stuff with that. There's a dive I know on River Street. Go on in and take my seat. There's a lot of friends I'll never meet. Gonna take a dive off River Street.
Someone take my place.
Okay.
Yeah, literally there's someone actively taking a place, and that is Cooper going into the place of Dougie.
Now, do you get, like, connotations of he's gonna go drive off a cliff? Right? Gonna take a dive off River Street?
Yes.
So, like, it's a play on words. You get a dive as being, like, a diner.
Yes.
And then later you get the dive as, like, I'm going to go careen my vehicle off of a cliff.
I'm basically going to die, and you can take my spot from here. Okay. And let's just say that kind of happens with Dougie this episode.
You look different from way down here. Like a circus mirror, I see flashes of you on the surface. I'm coming up from way down here. The water's clear. All I want is to see your face.
There's 2 points that you can do with this. Again, a longing to see something again. Mm-hmm. Like that's something that could be narratively taken. But also, the person that you come down here and you overall see yet again, the person who gains a face inside of the mob zone.
Would you say then that song fits pretty well for part 3?
Oh, yeah, heavily. Okay. Like, weirdly heavily.
Part 4 has Lark by Au revoir Simone. So long ago, there wasn't anyone out there I thought I needed to know.
Someone who was overall, long ago, very confident in what their overall positions were, and who's to say that overall potentially Cooper was that same way? Or people confident in who that person is, in which the way that they carry themselves, such as the people confused like how Dougie doesn't know like what he's doing or what he himself is.
But no more. When I find the day, leave my mind in the evening just as the day before.
I think there's very much a leave me be sort of like idea behind it. Just like when I find this, just like leave me as I was before and keep that in perpetuity, because an evening comes and a new morning comes along. So it's almost like a leave me alone situation.
Okay.
From what I'm understanding, in which like many people
are rather confusing in that particular part, and at least for my mind, it does bring the idea of time being kind of messed around with, because you're kind of going back and forward from day to evening and back to day again.
Yes.
So there is that future, is that past connection my brain wants to go to a little bit.
Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, leaving that overall person alone, it seems that may be the life that Dougie may have lived, in which like leave me be, people may assume that, and maybe that's where like some oversight can come into. So potential link there.
I saw the window was open, the cool air. I don't know what you saw there. Don't know what you saw in me.
Filled with overall doubt, filled with overall conflict of overall perception. Again, like between Dougie as well as Cooper.
Sometimes I want to be enough for you. Don't ask. Know that it's understood. There's not enough of me.
And that might be a case where if we are to read anything more from overall Dougie's character with the existence of holding on to a ring for himself, whatever life Dougie led, I don't think was in a realm similar to Leland. I think it may have been more similar to a point that he fell into his overall flaws and more so felt that he could not be beyond them. And probably that's where the Jade Ring comes in. He can't get past his overall gripes and flaws, and he's stuck in them.
I saw that something was broken. I've crossed the line. I'll point you to a better time, a safer place to be.
Where he tries to find comfort, if you will, amongst those overall broken lines over all issues. And that's where he finds respite, similar to Laura Palmer, how she ended up finding Leo Johnson, Jacques Renault, and find something comfortable to wallow in.
And then the last lyric here, sometimes I want to be enough for you. Don't ask. Know that it's done no good. Similar to the other lyric, but it has that ending part, know that it's done no good.
Yeah, if I'm to take something of potentially Dougie from beforehand, I think that this song very much could be a Dougie-centric song.
Shouldn't it go for part 3 then instead?
No.
Because that's the part that has old Dougie.
It has old Dougie, but this is where, in episode 4, we see him wander through Dougie's life, where we actually get introduced to his wife, where we get introduced to the life that he had beyond his overall addiction. Like, he's coming away from it, and he's coming back home, and having that overall want to be better for these people, but knowing that he can't because there's not enough.
Sure.
like, this is when that's introduced.
So, again, overall, parts 2, 3, and 4, you would say the songs match up with their episodes pretty well.
I think as far as whatever truth I found in it or whatever confirmation biases I can draw from it, yes.
Do you think it elevates the episodes having the song lyrics match up? Do you think you gain value from it in some way?
I think it's kind of like one of those cases where you have like a practice sheet before you end up taking a test.
Okay.
Where you can put these dots together. At the end of the day, whether you are correct or incorrect, you're still bringing something out of the overall practice of the situation. But also, it's a fun way to end off an episode by exploring this roadhouse and its many overall attendance. I think it, one, adds to the world, but also, two, adds to a general community that Twin Peaks had already built up.
You know, I think a fun way to end an episode is with, wait. Do you hear that sound? Professor, what's that sound? It's the whoosh counter.
Yep, it's still whooshing.
So, part 3, I counted 5 whooshes.
5? So very small amounts of whooshing.
Part 4, I may have neglected my duties because I only found 0. I did not notice any whooshes in the subtitles, and I looked. I might have missed one. Maybe they snuck by me. But I'm led to believe part 4 doesn't have any whooshes.
So you mean the whooshes whooshed away? Whooshingly?
So last time we had 29 whooshes between parts 1 and 2. Adding on to this week's 5, we get 34 whooshes total.
Still a lot of whooshes between 4 episodes, but it's definitely dropped off. We'll never see whooshes again, and from this point on,
it's going to be negative whooshes.
You're going to take off from your score. Yeah, for some reason, by the end of the return, I no longer have numbers. I just have the shape of Alabama. Shape of Alabama of whooshes.
So, because I'm disappointing you in this way, and for no other reason, I have 2 wonderful and strange questions of the week for you.
Oh boy, what a treat.
Number 1, you speculated the possibility that perhaps this individual at the bar, who we might meet, maybe even at the Roadhouse, could be someone with Cooper's connection, could be Annie. My question for you, how's Annie?
How's Annie not doing so good? If it's a bar that she's known to drink at, if that is the same character, probably not all too great. I don't know how many people come out positively out of the Red Room. We don't have many people who come out of the Red Room in general, and I would say the vast majority tend out to come out worse. Like, we do know that Major Briggs comes out of a situation that could be adjacent to the Red Room, and whether or not he skips straight to overall the White Lodge, whatever is explored there, that's still left fairly unknown. But we know Laura Palmer, we know Agent Dale Cooper, we know potentially the death of Wyndham Earl. I think that the majority shows and the associated effects that probably Annie has from it, they're probably not the greatest, probably not the best.
And my second wonderful and strange question of the week, is it all about the bunnies?
No, but yes. It's about the hunt and the willingness to scavenge around, even if it leads to a dead end of bunnies. As long as you are not causing pain, such as what it seems to be read off of good old Hawk with his overall reactions, I think it's a fun yet harmless practice to dig around and just have fun with it. If you discover bunnies along the way and you end up with a dead end, at the very least you had your journey along the way of the bunnies.
Well, yeah, but then the message is that the best part of the journey happened 25 years ago when it was already consumed. Now we're just left with missing absence.
And
What? Is this my way of secretly, camouflagingly answering how I feel about the show right now?
Nah, probably not.
Is this a metaphor?
I can't wait until, like, the final episode you come out and say that this was the greatest experience you've ever had, and it forever changed you, and the
Root
reason
canals do change a person, don't they, Professor?
Bzz, 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 bzz.
That's what those pliers were for.